Joining me this evening to make sense of the events of the day is an eminent panel. We do have from the extreme left Gabriel Muduma, who is the strategist, and next to him is Joseph Simeha. Both of them are affiliated, and we must make that clear. Simeha with NASA and Muduma from Jubilee. To my right, we do have Shifo Okore, who is a political analyst. Next, Miguna, a political analyst, former candidate for governor of Nairobi. And finally, lawyer and political analyst, Charles Kanjama. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go straight to Chebukati's statement this evening, and we all sat here as we listened to him. And he said 48% turnout as at 5 p.m. I need to hear from you what you make of that, and indeed the broader picture of the day's events. I want to start with you, Charles.
Okay, Linus, the first thing to be said is that for viewers to be aware that there is a mechanism whereby every 3 hours during the voting, the presiding officer at the polling station is meant to transmit the voter turnout figures. So at 9 o'clock, at 11, at 1, 3, 5 p.m. So these figures were being transmitted throughout the day to IBC. And you remember during the August elections, actually they gave regular updates in the course of the day. This time they did not do so. I was an observer during the voting in a few polling stations in Nairobi, and I can confirm that the presiding officers were sending those figures. So when Chebukati talks of 48%, he's probably talking about figures he's got from the Kim's gadgets. However,
48%, Charles, would make, that'll be about 9.1 million people voting today.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Do you think there is a gap between the figures transmitted and the physical evidence, what we saw on camera, what we've been physically witnessing?
First of all, I don't think it's a figure of 48% of all registered voters. I think it is 48% of the Kim's gadgets that transmitted data. I suspect the polling stations, the constituencies and counties that did not have voters, did not transmit results, are not included in this percentage. So we'll have to determine what are the absolute numbers. But having said that, Linus, the truth of the matter is that voting process was taking place much faster for those who went to vote than it did on 8th of August. Definitely there was a substantially depressed voter turnout, but I suspect that the evidence of the queues or lack thereof does not correlate exactly with the voter turnout. And you'd need to actually see how many people were voting. For the polling stations that I looked at in Nairobi, for example, the voter turnout was around 40-something%. Okay. That was for Nairobi.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. I want to go around here and give everybody a chance to just talk about Chebukati's statement and specific reference to voter turnout of 48%. Miguna.
Thank you, Linus. When I watched Chebukati speak, it reminded me of the invasion of Iraq when the American forces were just about to capture Baghdad. And Majid Ali, who was the Minister for Information for Saddam Hussein, said how they were defeating the Americans and they were annihilating them and they were just about to turn the superpower into some kind of, the repeat of the Waterloo. What I saw is a blatant, bald-faced lie. We all watched today, and we all saw a complete abandonment, boycott of elections in Kenya by the majority of voters. When I looked at some of the reports that I received during the day, by about 3 o'clock, 27 counties had a turnout of 0 to 3%. 0 to 3%. And this ranged from Kitui, Wajir, Mandera, Migori, Homa Bay, Kisumu, all over. So when Chebukati stands there to talk about 48%, it's worse than a joke. It's worse than a farce. And we know that this man is not competent to run any credible elections.
Now,
period.
It says 48%. Do you agree with Charles that he's possibly talking about the number of votes or the number of voters as transmitted by the KIMS kit?
That's a good question. My answer is this. Chebukati needed to make that clear. He did not. So he left it open to interpretation. What we understand of 48% is not what my friend Kajama is saying. No Kenyan thinks of KIMS kits when they talk about a turnout of 48%. They think of registered voters.
Okay.
So in a way, Chebukati is laying the groundwork for the sham election.
Okay. I'll be coming to the political analysts from the political parties. But before I go there, let's listen to Shifa.
I think my concern is the fact that he said 48% and then he said it's a rough estimate. And then it takes me back to August, the election in August, where we started seeing numbers pouring in and percentages coming in. And when people started asking questions about these numbers and these percentages, they were told they're just rough estimates, they're just rough figures. And then these rough figures and rough estimates ended up being the results in which a president was declared a winner. So my question and my concern right now with Chebukati is we need actual, factual, proven figures from him. If he talks of a percentage, can we have percentages that are exact? When he talks of turnout, can we just hear how many people and know exactly who these people are and where these percentages are coming from? Because you start playing around with numbers like this and then we end up in the same place where we can't even quantify and say 48% included A, B, C, D. Because I remember very well when he was speaking when he was addressing the people at Bomas, he said exactly 48%, and then someone asked in the audience, 48% means what specifically? He did not clarify. And like Miguna said, he's left it out for interpretation, so somebody can take away anything they want to take away from it. It's worrying. We need actual numbers. I mean, it was quote unquote a small election because we were just electing one person as far as everybody else is concerned. So we shouldn't really struggle with numbers. It shouldn't be difficult to prove what is and what isn't. Yeah.
Right. Let's go to Shimeka. 48%, reduced 48%.
Thank you, Linus. Certainly not. And let me just pick up from where my colleagues have left. Chebukati said 48%. And a journalist actually asked him, what are the actual numbers? And he said those are being worked out. Do you work out numbers from a percentage or you use numbers to work out a percentage? I mean, it is so simple. You use numbers to work out a percentage. But Chebukati has a percentage and is using that percentage to work out numbers which he'll give us later. So what Kanjama is saying here is hogwash. It cannot hold. And that 48% that Chebukati is talking about, he talked about 40,883 polling station having opened. But then he said, which he equated to voting. He said they sent a signal that they were open. But then he says that's equal to voting. Again, that can never be true. Because then again later he said 50 polling stations are the only ones that opened 100%, whatever that means. Are the only ones that opened 100%. So you could be anywhere and send a signal even from a bush somewhere and say, if you are a presiding officer, my polling station is open. So, we need to be precise. It's extremely unfortunate that even after what happened on the 8th of August and where it pushed this country, this chairman is still playing the kind of games he's playing, the extremely dangerous games. Because I don't know whether he imagines now that we are well beyond that. But to give us this without...
We will come to a substantive discussion about the difference in the performance of the IBC now from August. But before that, let's listen to Gabriel. We are talking 48 Yeah.
Thank you, Linus. I think even if you are interpreting numbers, there's a way you can interpret things correctly. And so if we are going, and it's simple arithmetic, and I'm liking what some of us are actually saying, and some really want to meander around the process, knowing very well that you can interpret things quite right. So anyway, we start by the 48% that we are being given, and this is how I'm looking at it. 48%, which is the national voter turnout. You look at 19 million. If you're telling us 19 million of the registered voters, 48% came out to vote, to me, you're looking at about 9.1 million votes, like you had said, 9.1. So if you look at that and what we saw at August 8th, I'm just saying, going by what Chebukati said and how I'm interpreting it. I mean, everybody can interpret, the way they want to interpret these numbers. So you're looking at about 6 million people who did not come out to vote. Is that the right figure? We just have to wait and see. But that's how I interpret what Chebukati told us. We can go into the nitty-gritties, and I think we may lose it, but this is how the man came and explained. And at this point, Linus, if we are actually going to take the numbers that we had by now, polling stations have already closed. So really, we can start now shaping near and reality of the numbers that we've just seen, starting to trickle in.
So 48% works with your estimation?
It actually does. It actually does. But we still have to wait and see. But I'm just going by what Chairman said.
Linus, please permit me this one.
Sure.
Kindly. Just as Kanjama said, every 3 hours, the KIMS kits are supposed to transmit, the POs through the KIMS kits are supposed to transmit the numbers, the actual numbers of the voter turnout. So actually from morning, about 8, 9 o'clock, the chairman should have begun to give us statistics on voter turnout. He has not been able to do that. He's giving us a percentage. What has happened to the transmissions from the polling stations on the actual numbers? It's a question I'm not asking you to answer, but it's a question I leave.
But Gabriel looks like he wants to respond to.
I mean, yes. If really this is an arithmetic, more like an arithmetic game. If somebody tells you 20 people came, or we are expecting 20 people, and 30% of 20 people came, really you should be able to figure out how many people came in. And that's what I'm saying. The chairman has just told us 48% came out. But we are looking at the registered voters, and 48% of which have already voted.
Right.
All right.
Just from Charles, because Simeka had raised the issue of the chairperson of the IEBC not proceeding from a certain number to the percentages, but doing things the other way around. He said that they're working on the numbers. They didn't give us any numbers. He gave us the percentage instead.
And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. You can use, you see, we go back to the interpretation factor. Based on what we've been told, it's like me telling you, Linus, if you know your way to town, then obviously you should know your way from town to home. Right. Really, that's what Chebukati is trying to tell us.
And I'm taking the numbers. Know my way out of this place.
Exactly.
Let's go to Charles.
Yeah, Linus, what I wanted to say is that it's still very early to speculate on what the 48% was in relation to, because we've not been given the data. Chebukati promised that data. My personal view is that an overall voter turnout of 48% appears too high based on what we have observed, and definitely there must be an explanation. Probably it's 48% of a smaller figure. What I was trying to do was to speculate on what is likely the reason why 48% was quoted, assuming good faith in Wafula Chebukati. And I think until we have evidence that he may be cooking something, we need to proceed from an assumption of good faith. Having said that...
And indeed, I want to bring to a close that discussion about the percentages, and we want to allow Chebukati to work on his numbers, work on his data, and come up with the percentages that are supported by specific numbers, which is why I want to take my panel to the next issue now, which is your overall take of the election as conducted today. Did it meet the expectations? Does it meet the threshold of a democratic exercise? And I want to give you each a minute to just run us through your thoughts and take on the whole exercise that was conducted today. I want to start with Charles still.
Okay, Linus, the exercise that was conducted today from a socio-political and security perspective falls far short of the exercise that was conducted on 8th of August. There is no question We're in a very poisoned political environment. The security situation was terrible in some places. There was widespread intimidation of voters. And even those who went to vote, it was almost like a profiling process, that if you vote, it must be that you're a Uhuru supporter. So even the idea of secret ballot was lost a bit, and it became almost like Mlolongo. That is on the socio-political environment. It was clearly a letdown from what we had on 8th of August. On the technical aspects, and
Do
speaking...
you want to use or reject the word being used about to describe it, which is a sham election?
No, I would not call it a sham election. I think an election is both a process and an environment. I was discussing the environment. When people think about election, and when the courts have spoken about elections before, they've spoken much more about process issues, that voters were enabled to go and vote, that they queued, they voted, the votes were counted, and so on. Definitely there are some places where the election was a sham. Definitely in the 10, 15, or 20% where no elections took place, it was a sham. In the other 80%, you have places where the opposition kept out fully, and for them, they consider the whole election a sham. For NASA, the whole election is a sham. But I think you also have to look at the election from the perspective of those who participated in the process, who voted, those who observed, those who are agents, and so on. And I think from the perspective of those people who participated in the process, the election clearly fell below the standard of what was there on 8th of August. But technically speaking, IBC made some effort to have some improvements.
We'll come to that. I'd want us to discuss that as a specific issue. That is the performance of the IBC this time compared to the 8th of August. Miguna, your overall take of this day in the election?
Linus, if you ask the question, did we have an election pursuant to the Constitution and the applicable laws? The answer is no. Did we have a free, fair, and credible election? The answer is no. Did we have a sham election? The answer is yes. I have seen images of small children aged between 3 to 9 casting ballots in many parts of the country. I've seen images and videos of police officers brutalizing people in residential areas in Homa Bay. Then I have watched today, when I saw the streaming of the so-called results, with numbers that indicate that Raila Odinga got some votes vis-a-vis Uhuru Kenyatta, when we all know that Raila Odinga pulled out of the race and that he ought not to have been
on the ballot.
Not a candidate on the ballot. The IBC knows this, the media knows this, but they are making it look like President Uhuru Kenyatta is winning or defeating Raila Odinga, when Raila Odinga said all his supporters must not vote, they should stay at home. So this is worse than a sham election. What we are having today in Kenya is a coup d'etat. We are having two people who are determined to keep power through the barrel of a gun. And they are doing what in law we call a show cause, a choreographed something that then leads to their coronation. But it is not an election. It is not an election in China. It's not an election in India. It's not an election in the United States. It certainly is not an election in Kenya.
But Miguna, yes. the opposition, the NASA coalition, yes, of candidate Raila Odinga, made the choice not to take part in this election.
No, I think that is being unfair to Raila Odinga. When the election of August 8th were nullified, the Supreme Court ordered clearly that this election, the fresh ones, must be conducted in accordance with the Constitution and the law. And they said, if you make the same mistakes, we'll nullify it again. The petitioner was Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga then looked at the reasons for judgment of the court. and picked out on the illegalities and the irregularities that had been committed that nullified the elections, and then said, for you to meet the standards that the court said you must meet, you must do this and that, meaning you must restructure the secretariat, you must restructure your operations, you must abide strictly by what has been ordered. The IBC refused to do so. So when Raila Odinga said he's not going on, is not going to participate, he's saying he's not escorting Uhuru Kenyatta into a coronation, which is what Chebukati has set out to do. Yes. So you can't really blame someone who went to court, won, was told that he should go again and have a fair contest, and there is no fair contest.
I think I want to just reiterate what the Chief Justice said during his ruling, that elections are not about numbers. Elections are about a process, and a process that must be legal, a process that must be legitimate, a process that must be verifiable and credible to the people of this republic. So you asked what we think about today's election. Was it a sham election, as they say it, or not? I absolutely believe it was, because I do not understand how we even assume to think that even the people who participated today, and I'm not belittling their participation, but this is a process that even the person who was supposed to conduct it had said publicly, I cannot deliver a credible poll. The reason why we went into another election was because the first poll that we did was not credible. But here we are being treated to all these plays where people are supposed to participate in something that is already coerced and infiltrated and full of so many irregularities, so many illegalities, so many people who should not be there in the first place. And then we want to call it an election. Look at the turnout. And this is not just a NASA or Jubilee issue. This is a Kenyan people speaking. And Kenyan people spoke today, and they spoke in silence. And there was a ballot resistance that happened today. And for anybody who doesn't see it, clearly you're blind. Because people spoke and they said, you know what, I will not participate in a process that has already jeopardized this country's progress moving forward. Democratically, they have the right not to vote. But when you tell people not to vote, and then you think they will not heed that they have that right, they should stay at home, that you don't really need them. You have other people who will practice their right. And then you realize that the turnout does not favor you. I wonder what you thought. Because people spoke today. People who wanted to participate in this thing. And as a matter of principle, and as a matter of legalities, and a matter of the law, and the rule of the people, surely, they could not participate in this election. So even the fact that we spent 12 billion just baffles me, because we've thrown another, taxpayers' money down the line and nobody's still going to be held accountable. It's sad.
Right. For me, there are no two ways about it, Linus. It was suddenly a sham election, or a charade, if you like. An election really, and the standard of measure, it's adherence to the Constitution and applicable laws. Did they actually adhere to that? Certainly not. Let's begin, and it includes the environment, as Kanyama rightly put it. Look at the environment in which this was done. Beginning, and let us not imagine that when we say election, that it was only about today. It's the entire process from the time the Supreme Court made the decision that it should happen again. So when we evaluate that process up to today, you see an environment in which you have a state that is almost gone rogue, enforcing its will on people, using the force of arms and violence, state violence. Is that really an election? To me, it isn't. In some places like Kisumu, where we certainly all know that an election never took place, the Electoral Commission is saying that partly took place, that some people voted in Kisumu. Which Kisumu is this? When they did not, the materials never left the tallying center.
But
places like Mandera.
Think of Githunguri, think of Kiambu today. Very orderly queues. Isn't that an election?
That is even what makes it more of a sham, because you had this long orderly queues, whereas in some other places we've been told there were no queues because it was one position. So are the people of Kiambu and Githunguri lazy, the election officials, that they could not process people as quickly as they were supposedly doing in other places? Why this double standard? Why isn't it uniform? Look at Mandera, where an election official went as far as throwing out the media, when we had been told that the media will stream results from polling stations all over the country. As we speak right now, I haven't seen any results being streamed. What kind of election are we talking about? To me, it's not an election. It's not worth speaking about.
Linus, I'll begin by saying an environment like what we saw today is very critical to the content that democracy presents in this nation. Among the rights that we enjoy in our Bill of Rights is the right to information and the right to vote. So I like the example you used. A man in Githunguri does not care about the shamness of it. He's following a direct order. And if you're following a direct order from the Supreme Court, that order was a sham. Because that's what the man in Githunguri is following. We were told to go back to an election. He probably doesn't even care about IBC. All he wants to know is that my vote, the substance of which made me wake up in the morning, counts. And it was legitimized by the same man who ordered you guys go do another election. You saw him voting in Kisii, in Nyamira rather. So the question that we are here to talk about a sham election is then to fortify the very fact that the person who said we go do another vote, Justice Maraga, has legitimized a sham. Now, hang on a minute. When we then move on to talk about the numbers that Shifa is talking about, 48% and the low voter turnout, that was expected. In fact, I'm surprised it has gone to 48%, or it's somewhere within those realms. I'm actually shocked because you look at all by-elections that we've ever had. They are on the whereabouts of about 30 to 40%. When you look at the 2005 referendum, it was about 52%. So this was expected. I mean, people are tired. The lethargy, you can feel it. Yes, okay? But the other scenario which I think would have worked with what Miguna is saying would have been to allow a sham election to go on uninterrupted. Because when you talk about a boycott, which is actually allowed democratically and constitutionally, you can boycott. But you cannot move to disrupt an election that you're calling a sham in the first place. Allow them to fiddle around. Allow them to do their shamness, if you call it. But at the end of the day, knowing fully well that they have not stuck to the directive that they got from the Supreme Court. Let them go. Go back to the very Supreme Court and allow it to be annulled again.
So hang on right there. Let me Miguna to respond here.
You see, Linus, it is unfortunate that you would have a distinguished gentleman like the one who has just spoken and just disregard facts, disregard logic, disregard reason. We know for a fact that the Supreme Court did not order that a sham election should happen. The Supreme Court, in fact, did the contrary. The Supreme Court said, do an election that strictly meets with the requirements of the Constitution and the law. That's not. Let me just finish.
Hold on.
Now, that's not what they ordered in strict compliance with the Constitution and the law, which means the Supreme Court ordered the IBC to conduct a credible election. What did the IBC do? The IBC conducted a sham election worse than what they did on August 8th. Now, let me say this. Because it is very important. Kenyans have actually spoken. Unfortunately, for some of you, we must recognize the fact that the majority of Kenyans have told Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, we do not support you. This was a referendum against them, and they decided to stay away, even from the Rift Valley. You go to Nandi, less than 20% of the people showed up to support William Ruto. So essentially what they're saying is this. We passed the Constitution of Kenya 2010, 65%. We are not going to allow you to subvert it, to pervert it, to abrogate it, and to treat Kenyans with contempt.
Linus, 1 minute. Miguna, you've said something. You've said something about it not following the staid directives of the Supreme Court. Who are we to decide what a sham is? And that's what I'm saying. If you feel the process was a sham, hang on a minute.
Yeah, hold on,
if you
hold on.
believe it was a sham, use the very same way you went and let the Supreme Court do as they did their own. Now, when we talk about 48%, because when you say people came and
We closed the topic
hang on
of
a minute.
48%.
No, he mentioned it. When you talk, I mean, in August, on August 8th, the turnout was 78. At this point, we are talking about 48. Do the math. It's past half. So when you say people are not with Ruto and Uhuru, you're actually lying to yourself because numbers are not supporting you. Do the math.
But what I'm saying, Gabriel, if I understand you, is the exercise conducted today was a credible election.
It is credible. To what we've seen, let it go, follow the STIDE directive, and then we wait and hear. It is a matter of wait and see. You cannot call something a sham just because you never participated in it. That is wrong. As a matter of fact, it's disingenuous.
You know, Linus,
Wait. I would not allow Charles to just stand by and watch, because you are involved in the question of whether this was or not a sham election.
You see, Linus, part of the problem we have as a country is that we are very polarized. And we are polarized based on which political coalition we are inclined to. And I think even
Are
the
you
answer to
describing
your question,
Mutuma and
in fact, probably every member of the panel, based on which political coalition they're inclined to, are likely to have a view, and all your viewers as well. Those who did not turn out to vote, consider the election to be a sham. Those who turned out to vote consider the election probably to have some element of credibility. And we have a mechanism to determine who is in the right, to determine the level of free and fairness of the election. Of course, we know objectively, and I would speak objectively and say that this election was definitely lower than the standard of 8th of August. There is no question. On most of the parameters, you can examine and assess and you'll find, yes, it was lower. But then the question that the court will have to deal with is, in the environment, socio-political, which was beyond the control of IBC, were they able to do a more credible election? I think that will be the question, because definitely the socio-political environment was poisoned. When you don't have safety or security, you cannot blame IBC. You can blame the security forces. You can blame those who tried to violate security, whether they were supporters of NASA or Jubilee. You can blame whoever, but not IBC. So IBC's job is to see whether they can get the relevant guarantees about security and safety, whether on the technical side they can try to provide the election. Of course, there were also issues of whether there were some ballot papers that were taken off by the flood waters in Kitui. Chebukati claimed that they were able to replace those ballot papers. These are matters that will need to be queried and scrutinized.
And I want to stay with you for a moment, because Mutuma did speak of the boycott as a right of the people who chose not to vote today. But in what you're describing as failure of this election to meet the threshold and the standards of the 8th of August election, did the boycott take away anything from this election?
Yes, it took away a great amount. It took away political legitimacy. Keep in mind that the Constitution does not prescribe for IBC to conduct an election in a situation of political legitimacy. They prescribe for IBC to conduct an election that technically complies with qualities of free and fair, which means accountable, verifiable, and so on. So definitely there was lack of legitimacy, because half of the people did not come out to vote, and even some of the supporters of Uhuru probably kept away because they were demotivated, demoralized. There was voter apathy. Definitely that is a concern about the electoral process. Whether that means the election was not free and fair is a different question. And I would say that the election was definitely not free and fair in those places where no polling took place, where there was voter intimidation. Was the scope of the lack of free and fair election so substantial as to vitiate or nullify the entire election? That will be a question that I imagine the Supreme Court in a few weeks' time will be dealing with.
Supreme Court. But before we go there, let's hear Schiffer. We interrupted you as well.
I know, sorry for. Thank you for saying something very interesting, Kanjama, which is lower than August, and lower than August in regards to the sorry, the ability of this election that is ongoing still, because I hear there's still a Saturday election. The ability of it to meet credibility thresholds, and which drives me to a question: what does a credible election look like, or feel like, or seem like, based on what you said, Gabriel? Because you were talking about, if people are conducting a sham election, let them go ahead with their shamness, and then you can go to court to petition it and question its legitimacy, or the fact that was it sham or not. That's a rhetorical question. The reason why I say that is because it sounds like such a lazy argument when you say that the fact that we are here is because we are allowing people to conduct whatever kind of election they want to conduct in a country that's heavily polarized, like Kanjama says, in a country that has divisions that are now very visible before each and every one of us, in a country where the democracy and the democratic state and space in which we exist is very fragile, and then we are allowing people to conduct whatever election they want to conduct, and then you say they can go to court and petition. I think that's very lazy as an argument at this time, in that the election that went was void, cost us 44 billion Kenya shillings. This one, that's another one that we've thrown under the bus, 12 billion Kenya shillings. And then we talk about an economy that's doing badly. And then we talk about how democracy is so expensive. And then we talk about how democracy is taking us backwards. Before you interrupt me, something has been said. You have failed to earn the confidence of voters to participate in a process. That is what the IEBC has done. They failed to rally people like me, who neither belong to NASA or Jubilee, but believe in the principle of, I have the right to vote, one. Two, I have the right to choose whomever I want, even if they are an independent candidate like Miguna was. And then three, I have the ability to boycott. And boycotting, by the way, took everything from this election. Because even in places where we were expecting, someone like me was expecting Nandi County to come out, that didn't happen. Leave alone the profile Luo, quote-unquote, Luo existent inhabitant counties. Places where we see Kalenjins and Kikuyus. The turnout was not that phenomenal. And then we talk about numbers that we can't quantify, and then you're supposed to work backwards like you were mentioning, Mr. Kaikai. It's a problem for me. You know why? Because we don't want to accept the fact that we have failed this country again, and we will still fail this country again if people don't start taking responsibility of the fact that you cannot hold sham elections and walk away scot-free without consequences. It is wrong.
My argument here, and it's very simple.
I'll give you the opportunity. Yes.
I asked a very simple question. Who is to say that it is a sham? We have institutions that are mandated with that work. I don't have the data. And the mama in Mashinani does not have that ability to call a fakeness or a sham. They care about the substance that they have voted, and for the longest feel and edify themselves into the character that my vote will count. That's all I care about. Now, we can go over this and we'll be here until morning talking about a low voter turnout is expected. Even if we are to go for another election, I can guarantee you we will not be at 48. We will go to something 28% because of the lethargy. This is world over, and I've given you the numbers. Check all the repeat elections, whether it's MP or governor. Check all of them. They've always had a low voter turnout, not only in Kenya, but in other places. So the argument of trying
you can't compare this, Muduma, you can't compare this to any other race, because this is the first time we have had a presidential.
It doesn't matter. It is still coming with a lot of lethargy. And then again, we don't have the support. The other thing I can tell you, we don't have the support structure that we had on August 8th. You had MPs, you had MCAs, you had governors. All these people were gearing in to bringing people out to vote.
So the panelists to my right, all the three, do say the boycott took something away from this election.
And I'm accepting the very same thing. Yeah. And that's why I've told you, We don't have the support structure that we had on August 8th. It is not there. And even if we were to repeat this again, the turnout will still go low.
Right. Simaka.
You know, actually, I wanted to protest, and then I'm glad you let let Muduma speak before me. It's even now clearer that I want to dissociate myself from what he's insinuating, that we sitting around this table do not have the capacity, basic capacity,
To understand what a sham.
understand what a sham election is. I mean, please, Muduma, for that one, please leave me out of it. I mean, I've gone to school, I have experience, I have practiced as a professional, I
Let's
know
wait
what our
and see.
constitution says, I know what the laws say. How dare you say that we do not have capacity to determine what is a sham election?
Let him
But
actually.
just a minute.
Hold on. Let him just respond to that.
Let us wait and see. And again, I don't know why you're not understanding me on this one. Me and you, Simecha, don't
Don't
the
count me
ability.
in.
I am just telling you. Okay, let's wait and see.
I do not want to be counted in that. For you, you know,
Linus, let's wait and see.
we could say, Muduma, that I cannot accuse you of being intelligent when you insist on saying what you're saying. Let me give you three things.
I have just told you facts.
Let me give you.
You just don't want to listen to them.
He asked.
Let me ask him again so that we can get it clear. You're saying, Gabriel, that we do not have the capacity to understand what a sham election is.
By the way, listen to me again for the uptenth time. The man in Mashinani Linus does not care whether it was a sham election or not. He went out to vote. And the substance in that ballot is what he hopes will be counted. All right? And it will produce.
But additionally,
and
you
it
had
will
said,
produce-
and
it will
that
produce
the institutions to
that are
tell us.
mandated, actually that are mandated. And who are those? The votes will be counted. If there is, and there are legitimate reasons to take this thing to the Supreme Court, as I hope it will, we will know whether it was a sham election or not. Simple as that.
Let me just finish my argument. You know, there's a reason why you brought the five of us around this table, and you didn't bring the man from Mashinani. There is a reason, and at the very minimum, I hope he understands why there is five of us here, and not the man or woman from Mashinani. Secondly, I just wanted to give him perhaps two or three reasons, because he had asked, what reasons can you give to allege that it's a sham election? Just weighing it, judging it against the law, even without going to the constitutional principles. Look at the law on transmission of results, where they're supposed to transmit through the KIEMS system, by law, the numbers and the image. Even before election day, Chiloba issued the so-called memo to say that we will not transmit the images. Right, because they couldn't supposedly what is the word for changing those kits to ensure that to configure. Thank you very much. Configure the KIEMS kits to ensure that all the names of the candidates are in there. That is already going against the law. The other one is appointment of returning officers. I don't even need to go into details of that. A court of law have found that it was illegal and irregular. The other one is an admission by the chairman, no less than the chairman himself, that the decision making in the commission was shambolic, that even decisions that the chairman knew are against the law, he was pushed to accept because they were subjected to voting. And I wondered, even decisions of a returning officer, which are not supposed to be subjected to voting, you can subject decisions of the chairman of IEBC or IEBC plenary to voting. But when he is acting as the national returning officer, returning officers make executive decisions. So I could go on and on. I know we don't have time for me to keep going on and on. There is more than enough to look at besides the lack of legitimacy, political legitimacy with regards to the boycott. There's a lot you can look at with regards to the law and the constitution, and you don't need a court of law to tell you that this was a sham election.
Let me just finish. Let me finalize with this one, because now
just hold on. I give Mutuma one more chance.
He talked about intelligence.
One more chance. Hold on.
1 minute.
Yes.
He talked about intelligence, and I'll actually bring you into the legal sphere. You go out in a court of law, and Maguna and Kanjama can tell us about this. Lawyers are intelligent. You go argue your case in front of a judge, but no, don't say all of them.
Hold on. Yes.
We are assuming they are all intelligent. But guess what? Who is the final arbiter? Does that mean when you lose a case, you're not intelligent? I don't think so. Then that's what I'm telling you. The final arbiter here is the Supreme Court. Let's wait.
Linus, let me say this. Number one, on August 8th, Chief Justice Maraga voted. He did. But he still nullified those elections. So just the fact that the Chief Justice voted does not mean the elections are not a sham. Number one. Number two, I agree with Shemeka completely. When you look, and I looked at the transmission of the results, I have already mentioned that they have listed the Right Honorable Raila Odinga as a candidate even though he withdrew. But worse than that, these guys have decided to display results only of President Uhuru Kenyatta, essentially. Because where is Ekuru Ekot's results? Where are Dida's results? Where are Kaluyu's results? Where are Maina's results? This is illegal. These people also have rights to know how many votes did they get. We are not seeing that.
The results are actually there.
No.
In the forms.
I'm saying they are not being displayed.
Okay.
Number three, it is interesting because I remember crystal clear when the matter of the petition was being heard before the Supreme Court. The argument brought by the petitioner was that how was it that people went to the polling station and cast their votes only for the presidential candidates, in this case, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and did not cast their votes for the other candidates. The argument that was brought by President Uhuru Kenyatta's lawyers was that there are people who just go there to vote for the president. So when you looked at the figures, you saw that the president purportedly got more votes than everybody else in their millions. So then you would have expected, with 2 more months of campaigns, and he was the only one campaigning, that he would top up. There would be more people showing up now that he's given extra time. But what have we seen? These people that had showed up to only vote for the president and did not vote for anybody else, where did they go? This then validates the reason or the argument that the petitioner had advanced, that these figures were cooked. They were inflated. Because if they existed on August 8th, where have these people gone? These people purportedly voted for Uhuru Kenyatta. Now they are vanished. Last point. My friend David Ohitu, who is a veteran journalist, sent me a message saying that he was at the St. Mary's School where Kanjama signed up as an observer. And that by 4 p.m., when Kanjama was there, only 18% of the registered voters had turned in. And I would want my friend Kanjama to be level with Kenyans and tell us, is my friend Oito wrong that only 18% of the registered voters are turned up? Because you are now talking about 47%. You know, as professionals, we help the country when we are balanced, when we are fair, when we are even-handed.
Linus, I wanted to respond to some issues, but because Miguna has asked me a question very specifically, before I
Observer
respond,
at St. Mary's. Yes.
Let me do so.
Yeah.
Observers can adopt different approaches to their observing of elections. There are those who stay in one polling station or one polling center throughout the day, and there are those who move from polling station to other. So I moved through several polling stations. It's not correct that I was in St. Mary's at 4 p.m. I was in St. Mary's in the morning at around 11 a.m. And at that time, the voter turnout was around 10 to 15%. I cannot tell what was the voter turnout at 5 p.m. But at 5 p.m., I was at the NSSF grounds. I think they're called NSSF grounds, opposite Laiko Regency. And I did check the voter turnout at that particular polling center, which has about 10 or so polling stations. Each stream is a polling station. And the voter turnout was ranging between 45 to, I think, 53%, average of 48%. And that is what I did indicate on air. So having dealt with that issue that Miguna has mentioned, Linus, I think I want to talk about two issues very quickly. One, on the question of the figures, I think there are many arguments that are being put across that are not fully substantiated on the figures. And I don't want us to get lost in the details about the figures, including about what was the variation between the presidential and the gubernatorial parliamentary results from the 8th August elections. Those figures were not anywhere in the range of hundreds of thousands or millions, as has been indicated. And I think we have to wait until IBC give us the actual figures so that we can discuss the question of legitimacy from the perspective of the voter turnout. What I wanted to talk about, however, is a different issue, which is very related, Linus, and it's this question. If the boycott, as appears to have happened, interferes so significantly with legitimacy of elections, if a boycott results in a sham, will we ever be able to have free and fair elections in future? Because won't our political coalition in future, whichever, this time it may be NASA, next time it may be Jubilee, decide to boycott elections, what will happen? And my second question, and it is a concern, is that if our current election rerun cannot reach the standard of 8th of August, the voter turnout very difficult, because in repeat elections it is a phenomenon, not just in Kenya but in many other countries. Will we be able to have any other repeat election, even if ordered by the Supreme Court, that will even reach the standard of 8th of August? If today supporters of NASA engage in violence in some parts of the country, what will stop supporters of Jubilee doing that in January or February? Won't we go through a cycle where voter intimidation, violence will undermine the ability to have free and fair elections? Would we go into a state of permanent paralysis? I think that's a question that we need to engage in as panelists here.
And indeed, those are questions that we'll engage in shortly after the break, because when we come back, we will be evaluating the last 60 days, and we'll be evaluating how the IEBC handled the last 60 days, and that is between the time the Supreme Court nullified the August 8th election and the time that this election was held, and that is today. We'll also be assessing and evaluating the performance of NASA and Jubilee, the two parties that are the protagonists in this particular contest. And that's when we come back from the break. And also we'll also be assessing and evaluating the role of the Supreme Court. Are we as a country making the Supreme Court the daycare center for our politics? Let's take a break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. We're coming to you live from the Bomas of Kenya, where the IEBC has staged the National Tallying Center right here and collecting and receiving results from across the country from an election that was held earlier. And to make sense of the day's events, we've got our panel that includes Shefo Kore, Charles Kanjama, Miguna, Gabriel Muthuma, and Joseph Shimeka. And I want us to go straight to the role of the Supreme Court, because some of the references from some of you, Gabriel, we all referred to the Supreme Court. And my question is, are we turning the Supreme Court to a daycare center of our politics?
Justifiably so by what we've been able to see. But then I don't want to make it the business that everybody has been talking about. We are over legalizing matters. I think as a final arbiter, I think it's a good place to run. Now, we are not going to take what I would call the muscle from the Supreme Court. But I think it's the high time they also take themselves seriously. Really, what we saw yesterday, a severe boycott, well, didn't augur well with so many people, and I think they still have an explanation to do. I don't know whether they'll do this to the nation or they may decide to keep quiet. That's up to them. But I think, to answer your question in simplest of terms, I feel as if we are overusing the Supreme Court.
Okay, great. Simeka.
First of all, it isn't a place for me, in my opinion, it isn't a place that I would surrender my intelligence to, or my sense of judgment. I wouldn't surrender it to the Supreme Court. At least that one I retain. I am still able to tell when we have a charade and when we have an election. However, it is the place, it will still remain the place when we want a binding legal decision. It will still, whether we like it or not, it will still remain the place with regards to a presidential election. When there's a dispute or when there are doubts on whether that election meets the standards, particularly legal and constitutional standards, the Supreme Court still remains the place to go, regardless of how many times we go there. I don't think we should even have any apology to make about that, because that is why we put it in place.
But are you noticing a trend where, even in conversations, the Supreme Court is being made the court of first reference instead of last resort when it comes to the presidential election?
It is true. There are things that we ought to have done, particularly with regards to the environment, with sorting out the environment, the political environment, socio-political environment, let me say, in which we are holding this election. We ought to have had these conversations as Kenyans and ensure that there are certain minimums of good behavior, let me call it that we meet ourselves. We don't need to go to court for it to enforce, to ensure that we do that. But look, even on legal matters, why would, for example, for what Chebukati went to court, that I want to, please give me an opinion. What am I supposed to do with regards to my role as a national returning officer? Even I knew what he was supposed to do. Why go and bother the Supreme Court with something like that? And there are things like, say, just to give you an example, because I can see you, I'm trying to respond to your signals and trying to push forward my thought. There are things like, let's say this election is challenged, and there could be many reasons, but let's say it's challenged, and someone asks a simple question before even you make a decision. When did the first batch of ballot papers arrive in this country? And a few days after that, Jirongo goes to court and gets his name, gets that case changed from him being bankrupt. But guess what? The ballot papers that had arrived before a court of law made that decision had his name. Do you even need the Supreme Court to tell you don't do that?
And indeed, we'll discuss good manners and also IBC in a short while. Let's discuss the Supreme Court, and I want to bring in Shifa. Of course, this concern that we are converting judges to babysitters.
Maybe we need to be babysitted. Maybe we have been playing a lot, and maybe people need to put us in our place as a people, as a republic, and as voters, and as those people who are trying to understand what a sham election is and what it isn't. I don't think we can overly, use the court. My issue is, why does it seem like people are running to the Supreme Court and not any other court? And what does that tell us about the other courts? Because for me, where I always come in and trying to understanding why people do what they do is trying to understand why they feel there's a need. For me, if I have to sue you now, Kai, I would rather go to Maraga's court and seek his audience rather than go somewhere else. Could it be there's a problem with other courts? Could it be that there's been a repetitive and consistent way in which people have not been heard in other places? In that, we've seen cases that will take forever to even go to like a full hearing. And the Supreme Court is now coming up full throttle, showing us and demonstrating to all of us that, I'm sorry, you're going to bring this before us, we'll listen to it, we'll look at everything. And even their decision to nullify a presidential election, doesn't that give them the credibility that Kenyans are looking for? Because I think we were in such a place of hopelessness, by the way, as a people, where we felt that the only way we get legal redress is now by finding out who we need to bribe in a court of law. And that is the Kenya that we live in. And then Maraga came and he showed us something that we've never seen before, that he can listen to cases of high-level, engaging, fundamental processes and still come out strongly and say, this is what needs to be done and this is how it needs to be done. So maybe the Supreme Court aspires and invokes confidence in Kenyans. Because what we don't understand is Kenyans are seeking people to hear them. And we've not been listening. Even today, people spoke. And some people are not hearing. They think it was some kind of resistance related to Raila or something. And I'm wondering, do you actually think that everybody who voted in the last election voted for Raila? Because that would be delusional, right? There were other candidates as well. But still, even those people didn't come out and vote, right? We need to start listening, and we need to start listening to Kenyans very fast. And we need to stop avoiding understanding and speaking about uncomfortable things. Because Kenyans have been speaking. Nurses have been speaking for how long? Who is listening? How long did it take for people to listen to doctors? How long did it take us to even listen to, to even respond to crisis in this country? And that's the thing. Supreme Court is listening to the people. And that is where the people will want to go. So for me, it's not even
just about the listening, or is it about the historic move to actually nullify an election? Because the Supreme Court listened in 2013.
It did. But you know what happened? There was a discussion, there was a negotiation. This time around, it has not spoken about negotiation. It talked about you will go back and get yourself together. You will go back and give Kenyans a credible election. You will go back, and not even just go back and this is how you go back. You see? Right. And that's different.
Right.
Yeah.
Migunas, the Supreme Court, the only adult in the House. Do you agree?
An excellent question, but two quick points before I answer the question. Number one, Chebukati has actually corrected his figure from 48% to 33% on his Twitter handle. So these figures keep changing, and obviously you are right. You should have started with the actual numbers to get the percentage. So of course, it's evolving. Number two, my wife just said something that I have to say. She said, where the tyranny of numbers? Where did Jubilee's tyranny of numbers go in this turnout? Anyway, so let's get to your question on the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court, yes.
You see, Linus, when you have a society where the institutions of state and government, such as the IEBC, have been effectively emasculated, this is no longer an independent institution. This is a branch of Jubilee. Two, then you have a leadership that does not recognize the Constitution, does not recognize the democratic principles and practice, and are intent on imposing despotism in the country. The only port of call are the courts of law, if they are still free, if they are still independent, if they are impartial. And in Kenya, unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation where the only arm of the judiciary which has demonstrated, at least in the recent past, that it has all those characteristics and qualities is the Supreme Court. It is the last line of defense for those who want to protect and uphold the Constitution and protect our democracy. So yes, it is the only adult remaining in terms of the institutions that we have, unfortunately. Now we must come out and defend it. We cannot allow a rogue, despotic government to emasculate it the same way it has emasculated all the other institutions. And when you look, let me just finish.
Do you think there is over-reliance, especially on the political?
I'm going to come to that. When you look at the shooting of the bodyguard cum driver of the Deputy Chief Justice, then you see the lack of quorum yesterday. Then you understand there is a concerted effort to revisit the independence of the Supreme Court. Now, are we over-relying on the Supreme Court? Absolutely not. Why do I say that? In fact, the Kenyan Supreme Court has been too lazy, has been too uninvolved, has not done what it ought to have done in terms of building jurisprudence, the number of cases it has handled. It has basically been handling petitions, election petitions. That's not what a Supreme Court does. A Supreme Court is the last review court. We have not seen jurisprudence in commercial law, in contracts, in insurance, in all other legal matters. So no, we are actually underworking this Supreme Court. We should overwork it.
Okay.
Because yesterday, some of them failed to show up and we didn't even know where they went. That is a scandal.
Okay, Charles.
Linus, the first thing I need to do is to clarify for your viewers that the Supreme Court under the Constitution has 3 mandates. The first is to hear appeals from the Court of Appeal, and they can hear appeals as a matter of right on constitutional questions or on other questions if there is a matter of general public importance. The second is to deal with advisory opinions in matters concerning county governments. And the third is that the Supreme Court is the court with the exclusive jurisdiction to deal with presidential election petitions and matters involving that issue. So it's not a question of having a choice of whether you can go to the High Court or another court. You are compelled by the Constitution to go to the Supreme Court. The second thing I want to say is that there are many legal scholars, comparative, looking at jurisprudence around the world, who are of the view that Supreme Courts are designed to be political courts. They are not just legal or judicial forums, but they are meant to tackle difficult political questions, and that's why they are designed to have so many judges so that they can tackle these questions. And that gives rise to the answer to the question you've asked. Is the Supreme Court being overused? Are we trying to farm out or outsource our political disputes instead of solving them through other political processes to the Supreme Court? And is there a danger? And my answer is, one, the Supreme Court should be able to deal with political issues and has been designed in that manner. But two, yes, there is a danger that the more you give the Supreme Court the room to intervene in political matters, what I'm calling the judicialization of politics, when we cannot resolve our political issues without reference to the Supreme Court, then you find in many countries where the Supreme Court gets very involved in political matters, that there is a corresponding reality, which is the politicization of the judiciary. You find, for example, in the American case, the American Constitution, there is a lot of focus by the Republicans and the Democrats on who is going to be appointed to serve as a Supreme Court judge. There is a lot of profiling of whether the judge will have this criteria or this other criteria. So we'll start possibly seeing in Kenya, our profiling will not be on the basis of ideology, but on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of what is your political inclination. So yes, there is a danger. And I think as the political players need to develop the ability to resolve more of their political issues so that we only go to the Supreme Court as a court of last resort, even on those matters touching on electoral politics.
I want to stay with you just on a new round of questions around the Supreme Court, and based on the responses and reactions that came after it nullified the presidential election on the 1st of September. The Supreme Court has suffered very serious attacks, political attacks, from the Jubilee coalition, from the president directly, President Kenyatta. There have been called names, including thugs, Wakora, and there is the famous "we shall revisit." Did the Supreme Court decision of September 1st leave it stronger or weaker?
Linus, I think it's still very early days. I have looked at Supreme Courts of other countries around the world which have faced similar crises in terms of a competition for power with the executive in demarcating what is the mandate and the role of the Supreme Court. There are those which have ended up stronger. The American Supreme Court, for example, 2 centuries ago, there was a famous judge, Chief Justice Marshall, who, after making a certain decision, Marbury versus Madison, all lawyers studied this case in first year constitutional law, actually became stronger. But you have other Supreme Courts, like the one of Venezuela, the one of Pakistan, there are so many, the one of Uganda, South Africa, where after intervening in political matters, it has caused a blowback by the executive, which then starts packing the Supreme Court with loyal judges, starts undermining what they consider as excessive independence of the Supreme Court. In the case of the Kenyan Supreme Court, it's still early days, but I think we can already see some signals that the decision that was taken by the Supreme Court, which was applauded all over the world for doing something that has not been done in Africa before, is beginning to have repercussions, even within the judiciary. We are beginning to see a greater politicization of the judiciary. We are having issues of raising of quorum or lack thereof in the Supreme Court itself. We are in early days, and I think for those who are really concerned about the strength of institutions, we worry that if the Supreme Court's authority or power is undermined, it can do a lot of harm to the country. Yet, on the other hand, I must also say that some of us do also worry that all other institutions in our country can be controlled because there are checks and balances to control them. But when you look at the Supreme Court in particular, it has to control itself. So what happens if the Supreme Court does not control itself? Who controls it?
Right.
That's a question.
This one is an interesting one. Linus, I have the privilege of having practiced in Canada for 23 years. And so it's not just an academic question for me. It is something that I've lived with. Nowhere in the world, in a functioning modern democracy, is a Supreme Court judge, leave alone the Chief Justice, challenged by a politician. Nowhere in the world. In fact, you do it, you resign. You can't do it in Canada. You can't do it in the United States. You can't do it in any modern democracy. The Supreme Court is the ultimate authority when it comes to the Constitution and the law and their interpretation. So my answer to you is this. The decision of September 1st left this Supreme Court very strong, and we should fortify it. It demonstrated to the country and the world that it can be done in Africa, that it can be done in Kenya, that we have men and women of integrity in Kenya. There was a time people had given up. I disagree, with due respect, with my friend Kanjama, that the Supreme Court is handling political problems. A petition is not a political problem. A petition is a legal, constitutional problem. It's a democratic problem. It is a problem that affects everyone. This is the right jurisdiction for the Supreme Court. In fact, the first jurisdiction. So the Supreme Court must robustly exercise this authority. The last question that he asked is the Supreme Court, can the Supreme Court become rogue? That is absurd. A court of law, if it operates within its mandate, can never become rogue. because it is the court of law. We are a country governed by the rule of law. And the only body, authority, that defines what that is the judiciary. So we must carve out and leave that to be exercised robustly by the judiciary.
With regard, just a moment, I follow up with Miguna. You say it emerged stronger after the ruling of the 1st of September, but there were impressions that the judges looked untidy in the delivery of their ruling, because some of the judges, one of the judges in the minority decision, attacked their colleagues. Was this healthy?
It is very healthy. Let me tell you, what we are doing here is healthy for democracy, for example. Is the NTV stronger by having 5 people who disagree with each other? Yes, of course. That is what democracy is all about. Should these people shake hands, drink tea, or face as a firing squad? They should exactly do what I have said before I said firing squad.
And with that, you are addressing Muthuma.
No, so my point is this. The fact that the Supreme Court had the courage not just to nullify an election and be the first one to do so, but also to disagree amongst themselves, is good for jurisprudence, is good for democracy, is good for our constitutionalism. That's what we want. So that makes the institution stronger.
Right.
What I disagree with the IBC is that the chair is not a chair.
We'll actually have
we'll
have a substantive discussion about the IEBC in a moment. But Charles, you wanted to respond.
Linus, I think it's not true that in these functioning democracies you never have exchanges or disagreements between the executive and the judiciary. I'll give some examples. Recently, in the United Kingdom, as a result of the Brexit vote, the matter went to the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, and the head of the Conservative Party actually made comments about whether the United Kingdom Supreme Court can interfere with the decision of British voters in a referendum. There was an exchange. Of course, the exchange was...
But that's very different from calling judges' names.
No, I'm not talking... There is a Supreme Court. Miguna, you may have failed to catch up with the times, but about more than 5 years ago, the House of Lords was converted to a Supreme Court. Let me update Miguna on that particular issue.
No, he practices in Canada, not England.
He practices...
Yes.
No, it is... The House of Lords was... the Judicial House of Lords was abolished more than 5 years ago. In fact, about 10 years ago, Miguna. It's now a Supreme Court. In the United States of America, during the Obamacare battle, which reached the Supreme Court, there was also many comments by members of President Obama's government about whether the Supreme Court really can dare to overturn his centerpiece legislation. And these are things that were articulated actually in the media. And I can quote so many other examples. The truth of the matter is that even in advanced democracies that sometimes we praise to high heavens, they have faced the same challenges. And I'm talking about something that is a reality. It happens every year. The second thing I wanted to say is that to claim that the Supreme Court, or indeed the judiciary, cannot, that it is impossible for them to supersede their authority, to me is a constitutional heresy. Because the Constitution is clear that the ultimate authority is with the Constitution, and it is delegated from the people. The judiciary exercises a delegated and limited authority. It is possible, and there are jurisprudential philosophies that discuss the circumstances in which this can happen. So that aside, because that is a bit more academic, I think your viewers are more interested in, is the Supreme Court of Kenya... Miguna can talk after I finish.
If they act within the Constitution.
If is the Supreme Court of Kenya...
I've just been reminded, and it's not a legal position,
yes,
that there are 5 panelists in
yes,
this
let me just
debate,
finish.
which is why I'll discontinue you and
Okay,
just allow
well.
Schaefer to take over. We are discussing the Supreme Court. Is it stronger or weaker after the decision of September 1st?
Stronger, and I will give you a practical example. Last month, or was it the month before, I got the opportunity to observe the German election. And while I was there, there was also there was an all-round African delegation from different countries. And amongst all the African countries, before I even talk about the German election, there was a feeling of the fact that for the first time, Kenya could be the only country in the continent of Africa that has a legitimate Supreme Court that all of them aspire to. And most of them that I interacted with, and I'm talking about the delegates from other African countries, talked about how did your Supreme Court do what they did, right? Because there's a tendency in the continent and in specific countries where you find that people in high legal offices are either coerced into making certain decisions or bribed, or, there's just a way in which decisions that are made legally in court are never seen to be independent and are never seen to be just. That is one thing that stood out. So did it make our Supreme Court stronger? Yes, it did. While I was in Germany now talking to the Germans, they asked me, now that you're going into our own election, and they worried about the rise of AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, the very extreme rightist party that was bringing in all this Nazi thinking kind of way of doing things. They wondered, do you think our own people would be able to have that kind of litigation when it came to this kind of process? Meaning, everybody has their eyes on Kenya. And the only reason why we made headlines this time round, apart from all other mediocre things that we make headlines about, was the fact that we were trailblazing on that point and on that aspect. Or we have a judiciary that seemed supreme, that believed in the people, that upheld the rule of law, that protected the rights of the people. And that indeed made it stronger. And that's the only reason why, when they talked about, because I don't want to say we, when they talked about the fact that we'll go into another election and they gave terms and conditions which had to be met, people felt this is good. We can go back and do this with the confidence of we have a watchdog. We have somebody checking everybody in power who has always gotten away with illegalities and irregularities that we are still seeing that could come up now. So yes, it made our Supreme Court very strong.
But considering the events yesterday, Schiffer, do you think the watchdog can actually get tired?
The watchdog can get tired because the watchdog is comprised of human beings, but the watchdog has to step up and show up. And yesterday's event were very sad for me because when I hear that two members of such a high-level court just don't show up, there's no reason, they just did not show up. It's like you're inviting me here and I just don't show up. It's disrespectful. Because democracy requires a moral principle of showing up. It's like a relationship. I show up no matter how we disagree. I show up no matter how much we see through parallel lines. I show up even if I still don't believe in what you're doing. I show up. So the fact that they did not show up, even though the president of the judiciary, Maraga, had called them and they knew in advance that there is a case to be had or there's a petition to be had, and they didn't show up. And then there was one that could not find a flight to Nairobi from wherever they were. I thought it was ridiculously cute and not in a nice way. Because one thing that you do is you completely make the people who presented this, and this was a petition by voters who said we need to postpone this election. Voters who were supposed to participate in this election now, that we are all calling a sham election, and you don't show up. What is happening? Because it was uncalled for, and that, by the way, made me very angry. Okay. They should do better.
All right. Let me go to my left now, to the two people who really disagree in this panel. And they are welcome to agree now on the issue of whether the Supreme Court emerges stronger or weaker after the September 1st decision. Simeka.
First of all, I beg Shefa to permit me to vary what she said about the why judges must appear in court when they are needed, especially judges of the Supreme Court. Yeah. It's not a matter of courtesy or good manners or respect. It's a matter of obligatory constitutional duty. Yes. They owe it to us. They owe it to this nation, to the Constitution, to their call of duty. So they do not have they don't even have an alternative. There's no other option. So what they did is, I even failed to find the words to describe them, and I believe in the fullness of time it will come out, and I hope that they must bear the consequences for the kind of thing they did to this country yesterday. Did the Supreme Court emerge stronger or not? In my opinion, to add on to a bit of what has been said around the table, we were in a confusion in 2013 2013 elections. Elections in the last 1 or 2 decades, well, almost maybe 4 or 5 decades, have almost always thrown us into a confusion. Now, the Supreme Court, then led by Chief Justice Mutunga, had an opportunity to call us to order and get us out of that confusion. The Supreme Court then, in my opinion, decided to become part of that confusion. The Supreme Court under Justice Maraga got an opportunity, actually called us to order very sternly, differentiated itself from us. It said, look, we will not be part of that confusion. Stop right there. Go right back and do it the right way. Now, that is big for me. For a Supreme Court to do that and do it so firmly, for me, it can only leave a Supreme Court stronger. Secondly, a demonstration of the strength of leadership in the court. It gave an opportunity to the Chief Justice to demonstrate what he's made of, his mettle. Because there had been quite a bit of disappointment with William Mutunga, partly because of what happened in 2013. So another opportunity arose, not only with, by the way, not when I say 2013 and beyond actually, not only with the elections, the petition, but also with the succession wars in the Supreme Court. But come to this Chief Justice and very firmly demonstrated leadership. That leaves the court very, very strong.
Would you have the same view of him if he had upheld the election of 8th?
That's actually what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, because he threw out this election and gave reasons. And that, in fact, I would have cited this as part of a response to the question that was asked earlier, whether a court of law can be rogue or not. It could be, but it's limited because of the nature of practice of law. It has parameters that is unlike politics, based on the Constitution, based on the law, based on regulations, based on the rules of procedure. So that when you do the wrong thing, like to disappear a whole day and then reappear in the night to issue countermand orders of a lower court, we can tell that it's mischief. Because we look at the Constitution, the law, regulations, and rules of procedure, and we can just tell what you've done is unacceptable.
And of course, you're referring to the Court of Appeal decision yesterday.
Yes. So yes. I would have still hailed Maraga and the rest of the court. And when I say the rest of the court, I include all of them, including the dissenters. They're part of that court. Finally, especially in handling what I would call management of the outcomes of that decision of the first. Beyond that decision, there have been many other things going to that court because of that decision. For me, it has helped us to put the judges to the test of character and the call of and the fidelity to call of duty. It has enabled us as a nation to look at these judges and tell who really is committed to what they were put in that court for and who is not. That is not a weakness. That is a strength. In fact, when you begin to discover the weaknesses in your institutions before they mess you up like the IEBC did, that is a evidence of strength that you can begin to correct those weaknesses. And some people are already doing that with the Judicial Service Commission.
Right. Let's see, your colleague.
The reason why I'm laughing actually is the question that you asked. If the decision after the election that we saw that was nullified,
September 1st.
If the decision was otherwise, would that court would it have been stronger?
I said yes.
If it was nullified? I don't think so. Anyway, I think the first thing that I derive from this conversation, first of all, I'll agree with Kanjama to an extent where he says, the Constitution reigns supreme. And this is where we derive, and the Supreme Court derives, the power to act the way they are able to do their things in the cases that come in front of them. And one thing that I actually have liked with the way Supreme Court has actually been driving their business is I think they have some sobriety in them, but it would be a rush to actually judge them at this point. What matters to me would be the credibility of their term in office. at the end of the day, that's what will count, not the cases that they bring out. How credible are these people? There was a time I had, in fact, I was advising a friend, and I said, I think Justice Maraga has done something off a little bit. And what had he done? He had called for a presser. And I was now trying to, I've had people giving examples of the Supreme Courts in the United States. And actually, Miguna would tell you, I have never had a Supreme Court judge actually call a presser. And I thought I was telling a friend, actually, that's a very bad thing. I have never seen it happen, anywhere in the world. Donald Trump, if you listen to him, he calls he has a way of insulting even the judges, but you'll never hear them call a presser or come on the microphone and actually answer to him. So when he started doing that, I was like, I hope this would stop. And I think he learned from at that particular, I've never had Justice Maraga call on a presser, which I thought was a very good thing. But going to, to the basic element of use of
he
you
did call
asking.
a press conference once when he felt the court was being attacked. You remember?
And that's what I'm saying. And even at this point, I don't think I wouldn't do that. I would not even encourage it, because the court will be attacked. That is what people do. We attack judgments. We'll continue. Will he be calling a presser all the time his court is attacked? I don't think that's the right thing to do. But moving on to the issue of being a rogue institution, can it happen? I think it's justified from what we've been able to see. Justice Tanui, all right? He was answering corruption cases. We've had the former Deputy Chief Justice, Nancy Baraza, all right? The wrongness really does not have to come in how or a directive that you give through a court. You can have people really whose credibility is questioned. So at the end of the day, we must remember the Supreme Court is actually run by people who are not angels, people who suffer from the shortcomings that all of us suffer from. And I think what we actually would be wanting is to see a Supreme Court that upholds the credibility of that particular office. I think really, in short, that is what we should be looking for.
And Gabriel, you said the Supreme Court judges are not angels, and I want to hear your comment on this very severe attacks they suffered for the decision they took on the 1st of September. The president himself leading these attacks and saying, we shall revisit, which is a threat to the court.
Nowhere in the world, Linus, have I ever seen somebody lose a case and they were happy about it. The president is human, and so was Raila when he made the speech in Mombasa at Joho's inauguration.
Linus, I have to respond to you.
Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute.
I'll give you the
Some of the things that he talked about were similar to what the president said, even though President went about to call, network Yawakora and things like those. All right? I am not saying it is the right thing. No. But all I'm saying is we are dealing with people who are not angels. We must be alive to that.
Just explain to me what you mean by president being human with regard to the statement, we shall revisit, which is a threat.
Really? Did you take it as a threat? How will he revisit it? By constituting, parliament or people to look into the conduct of Supreme Court judges? We are here talking about rogue judges. They have been accused. Hey, by the way, are you forgetting? Justice Maraga himself sat at a committee led by Sharad Rao. The place where he went and picked the Bible. Why was he picking the Bible? Because somebody had actually made an accusation that he was corrupt. The case of the Ainamoi MP, he went through the very same thing. Linus, we are talking about judges who are not angels, and that's why I'm saying we may judge them too early. I would like to judge or talk about a judge after his term, the credibility of his term in office. That is what would really make a change in me. Right now, we can go ahead and play around this thing, and the same people who are saying they are strengthened, the Supreme Court is strong today, would be telling you a different story if another judgment comes in the near future. Trust me.
And just hold on. I want to give Miguna a chance to revisit your statement.
I know he wants to revisit it, but I've used facts.
Linus, the problem is that Mutuma has meandered all over. Your question was very simple. Did this decision leave the Supreme Court strong or not? The point is this. We have not said the Supreme Court judges of the Supreme Court is an angel. We have not said that. we were not determining or assessing their legacy after they have served. We are not saying they cannot make mistakes. They are not saints. We are not saying they will not make mistakes or that we will not disagree with any decision they make in the future. We are saying, based on the nullification of the presidential election of August 8th, did that leave them strong or weak? But what I wanted to respond to was actually your statement on the Supreme Court judges and the judiciary elsewhere. I would like to correct you respectfully that you are wrong. Number one, the Chief Justice in Kenya has 3 roles. Number one is the president of the court, the Supreme Court, is the head of the judiciary, is the Chief Justice. In fact, he has more roles. He chairs the Judicial Service Commission. This does not happen anywhere else in the world. He is both an administrator and a judge. So, as an administrator, he can call a press conference to defend the institution and his fellow judges and magistrates, people who work under him. And that's what he did. It was the right thing to do. The threats that he received were not just threats against his personal security and safety. He had actually called for protection from the police, and he said he did not receive it. There were threats made to him as a person, not to the decision that was rendered by the Supreme Court. If you remember, the decision was not a Maraga decision. The decision was the decision of the Supreme Court. You could quibble, you could quarrel with the reasons of the decision, the ratio, the principles of law, anything you want. But they attacked him as a mukora. This is an honest man of integrity who did his job. That's the difference. Now, have there been press conferences and press releases elsewhere? Yes, there have been, many of them, even in Canada where I practice law. Whenever the court has felt threatened, threats that would undermine the administration of law, they speak out in defense of the rule of law, constitutionalism, and the independence of the judiciary. And I would encourage Maraga to keep on doing so.
I really would want to see Meguna, because you've actually spoken too much on that avenue. The way I remember Maraga making a presser, it was for him saying that he will do what is right. And that's what I was against.
He did that
and that's
as the Judicial Service Commission, JSC.
We can have as many codes, you know, the many codes you can want to pull, but at the end of the day, many people castigated him for calling that presser. I would not have done it if I was him. And I've liked the fact that, and I said I would not have. But again, what I've liked moving forward is actually Beguna, and you can actually attest to this fact, he has cut those pressers to a bare
He has done
minimum.
Right. I want to
Exactly.
close. I have to close the question of the Supreme Court because we had quite a number of institutions to discuss tonight, and more importantly, the IEBC. I want us to discuss the IEBC very briefly by evaluating their performance between the time the decision of the Supreme Court nullified the August 8th election and now when they are when they've just carried out this exercise. And I want to draw the panel's attention to recent events. First, the resignation of Roslyn Akombe, and then the press conference right from the same building where he is right now by Wafula Chebukati. He appeared to say and do things 8 days to the election that he should have done much earlier within the 60 days window that the Supreme Court had provided. Don't you think so, Charles?
Linus, definitely when you look at the performance of IBC over the last 2 months, IBC cuts the figure of an embattled commission. And the chair, especially in the last few weeks, cuts the figure of an embattled chairman. A chairman who is in conflict with his own commissioners, who has stated publicly that he's unable to get his ideas upheld, they are shot down by the majority of commissioners. Definitely those are not things that will build confidence in ordinary Kenyans who are listening and observing what IBC is doing. But let me also say that the position of IBC has been a very difficult one, not purely because of matters of their own creation. I think we tend to focus so much of the blame on IBC to the extent of ignoring all the other political and state actors that are also part of the political environment and that are deteriorating the situation. I personally think that Chebukati in the last week grew some steel in insisting that he needs to talk to Honorable Raila Odinga and the President Uhuru Kenyatta to try and prevail upon them to lower the political temperatures. He did talk to them. He didn't succeed. He did not succeed in what he was.
To reach that point, why did it take this long?
It's difficult to say. I think it is a crescendo. Things were building towards a crisis. And sometimes you make previous attempts to resolve the crisis, and you don't consider those attempts as having failed until you are almost at the last moment. And I think it was building up as a crescendo. He reached a point where he said, it is enough. I can no longer be ruled by majority decision of the commission. I need to speak my mind. And I would say that I'm sympathetic with Chebukati. Don't forget he's had, right now, 10 months to carry out his mandate, which is a mandate that devours its occupants. It's a mandate that devours every occupant. Nobody is able to carry out general elections more than once in Kenya from 2007 at least. So Chebukati was now faced with this very difficult situation of being the first chairman of IBC to be expected to carry out 2 presidential elections before resigning. And I think that was part of the challenge. It was a difficult situation. I do agree he could have done better, but I feel that those other stakeholders who should have supported his role, other members in the commission, the secretariat, very importantly the political players, even the judiciary that keeps issuing decisions, sometimes apparently contradictory to IBC, have also played a role in getting us to the morass that we are in right now.
Right. Miguna, your take on the IBC, the last 60 days, Chebukati as a person, as a chairperson of the IBC.
Linus, the IBC is dysfunctional, it is lethargic, it is inept, and it is compromised. The chairman is weak, confused, and incompetent. And he demonstrated that in many, many ways. Number one, he said that he had given both Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta yellow cards, and that he would give them red cards if certain things did not happen. Those things did not happen, and he did not issue red card. 2, he said, as presently constituted, the IBC cannot conduct a credible poll. He cannot guarantee that he would be able to deliver a fair and credible poll today. If the demands he had made on his long memo immediately after the nullification were not satisfied, none of them have been satisfied, and yet he has plunged on. He also has gone to the Supreme Court with questions that the court have called mischievous or just purely out of ineptness. And he's continued to do that. This is a man that has stood today to tell us of an artificial percentage of turnout that he has revised within 1 hour of him addressing the press. The man has no backbone. The man is not a manager. The man does not behave, speak, or act like a professional. In fact, Chebukati is the worst electoral manager in the Republic of Kenya since independence. It is a shame that we have people like him presiding over an electoral body. That's my assessment of him.
You refer to yellow cards and red cards.
Yes.
Was he really capable of issuing a red card, and what was that red card going to look like?
You see, and I felt almost sorry for him, because this is like a man given to carry out a task that he's just not capable of. For instance, he ordered both the former Prime Minister and the President to meetings, and he had said, he gave the indication that he wanted joint meetings. The Prime Minister went to his office, the President did not. The President actually commanded him to a meeting at his Arambe House office. Chebukati went there with his tail between his legs, sat there very fearful. The President greeted him like he was greeting some kind of servant, and sat there, and within 8 seconds, at least the clip that we got from the office of the President, he was gone. There was no press release by him. There was no joint communique. There was no briefing at all. So we don't have a chair of an electoral body. Yes, he could have given a red card because he's the chairman, a titular legal chair of the IBC. So he could warn candidates. These are candidates. When he meets Uhuru Kenyatta, he's not meeting Uhuru Kenyatta as head of state and head of government. He's just meeting Uhuru Kenyatta as Uhuru Kenyatta, the candidate. He's also meeting Raila Odinga as Raila Odinga, the candidate. But yet, when we see him meeting Uhuru Kenyatta, he goes there like he's meeting the president. So this is not a man capable of interpreting the law to understand his role in managing elections. These elections, the so-called elections that are being conducted now, are not just a sham. They are a travesty. And Chebukati is going to go down in history as a very incompetent, compromised man.
Right, Shifa, is Miguna being too harsh on Wafula Chebukati, who has explained his tribulations, including claiming that he's been outvoted on every issue that he brought up there. He's been outnumbered by some of the commissioners that don't agree with him. He had a CEO who was more of an equal or a boss.
Yeah.
So is it being too harsh?
Well, not really. I am all for brutal truth, because these are very serious times this country is in, and people should realize that, and the level of leadership and the quality of leadership is really wanting. First of all, let me start from just the word leadership and then try and align that with Chebukati. How was he elected to where he is? There were people highly qualified than him. Why were they not elected? Why do we have people who do not qualify for positions that mean everything for us in this country moving forward, in positions where they can't perform, they can't deliver, they cannot command leadership in these places? It's a problem. So if we start from where and how he came into being, there are question marks. There are things that have never been answered. That's a problem for me. Because we saw a whole list. He was the least performing candidate, I think, right? Yeah, in the entire list. And he was the one elected, for this position.
So you're saying his performance reflected that?
Absolutely. Would you hire me if I did not qualify or meet the criteria in which you have set down for me to be able to deliver?
You certainly met the criteria to be in this panel.
Absolutely. Thank you. You see, so that is a big problem. Another thing that comes into play when leadership is lacking is accountability will also lack. Because they're not accountable to the process, they're not accountable to their office, they're not accountable to the independent body they represent, they're accountable to the people selected or elected them. That's something we need to understand. Another thing that comes when leadership is in question is the fact that we do not have anybody or anyone who can, who listens to you. And that we have seen, like what you've just demonstrated. He had a CEO who would shut down what he's saying, There's everything falling apart, literally, in his house, and he can't do anything. Because you don't qualify to speak to us. How did you get here in the first place? And this I know that are the internal questions and struggles that he's facing. And then here we are with somebody who does not qualify to run this election, who does not qualify to get us to the promised land, whatever that means to every Kenyan right now, in this position, who has led us to a place where the presidential election was nullified. He went on to conduct another sham election. He's still giving us numbers. There's a problem with this country.
Now, Charles said all that, only within 10 months.
No, I think it's an excuse. And it's letting people off the hook easily because now nobody's going to take accountability. If you give me the responsibility to sit in a certain particular office and deliver, I deliver. It is not about, but is it enough time for you? He knew what he was set up to do. He knew that this could happen. He knows the stakes are high. He knows, yes, he applied for the job. He knows the stakes are high. Why do you even want a job that you cannot deliver? Why would I want to sit here next to you and talk about these very delicate issues of Kenya if I know I do not understand them? Right? It's a problem.
Can I go to my left now?
Please.
Let me go to my left now, because nothing positive about Wafula Wanyonyi Chebukati, the chairperson of the IEBC, and the team he leads. Now, one of the issues that emerged from his statement, he claims the commission is infiltrated by the political parties, NASA and Jubilee, basically saying that 4 of the commissioners could as well have operated from one of the party headquarters. Now, Shimeka, do you think that maybe here is a person who just found an environment that was impossible for him to function?
As we've said earlier, when you sign up for a certain job, when you ask that you'd like to do a certain job, and specifically this kind of work, you must know what it takes. You must know what you are signing up for. And to sign up to be an arbiter for elections, it's such a critical thing that you cannot go there expecting that it's going to be child's play. The very first moment you realize that there are people within your house who are compromising, the commission, whether commissioners or staff, who are compromising your work and therefore the credibility of the commission and therefore even your own personal credibility, you act. You act immediately. And if you find there are impeding forces, you sound this up, you let the nation know, and if you cannot continue, you quit immediately. It doesn't matter the circumstances. Because it's about honor. And that honor is not just personal. It's honor of that office, and it's honor of that institution for the sake of the nation. So this man, you can try and look as hard as you want, Linus, but I doubt that you'll find anything positive worth of discussing on this show. I doubt. I very much doubt. Because to take a position like this in public service, you must have leadership skills. You must, at the very minimum, have the knowledge, the skills, and the intelligence he doesn't have. By demonstration, beginning with the panel, where they placed him on the performance on the interviews, and how actually he has proved that panel right in terms of how he has performed. So it's nothing personal. This was and still is a big mistake for this country. And he's the sole reason, with that rogue CEO of the commission, that we find ourselves where we are just now. Including us being here at this hour.
At this hour.
Linus, let me tell you,
Gabriel,
the
yes.
con of man will never be understood. But at least one thing I like what Semeka has said, the panel. Honestly, Chairman Chebukati did not hire himself. He never found himself in that office. He was picked by one Orengo and his counterpart, the senator then, Kiraito. That's how he went through the cracks. And it's so funny. It's like me hiring somebody who is not able to live up to the task and then complaining. I'm also part of that failure. And this is one thing we should all agree. You see, it's also funny that we removed, if I may add, the Asan-led commission because they did not perform. And we went out, came with something called a legal political bypass, and we brought in Chebukati. So before we point fingers at him, let us look at the failures that this commission, bipartisan commission, did. Because that's where the disservice begins. Chebukati did not find himself in office. And kindly, let's not try to play holy. It is the sins that we've actually taken through. That is why we are here.
Now, Gabriel, you've explained. Hold on a second.
No, it's
because
not factually wrong.
Just hold on, because
you see, Miguna wants to say he was brought in by Uhuru, which is erroneous. It's wrong.
Hold on, Gabriel.
Be factual.
You've explained how Wafula Chebukati got to the job. Now, tell us, what do you think about how he's done the job?
Honestly, he has not lived up to the expectation. I'll tell you this, and I'll tell you why. And the reason why he has not lived up to it, it is because we have not given him the support. Allow me to say this. It is the commissioner, Akombe, who left, who actually spoke about them filing so many cases at the High Court and the Supreme Court and losing almost all of them. And I sat down and asked myself, what if Kenyans of goodwill, all players, and all stakeholders, Miguna included, if we had given Chebukati the support that he required, could he have done something different? No, let's be honest. Let's look at him as somebody who needed support from all stakeholders. Would he have done something different? I bet he could have.
And what is that support that you think he didn't get?
Number one, and I'm actually reporting what Akombe said. They've been hauled back and forth to court.
We'll hire competent lawyers like Kanjaba.
Hang on a minute. Those are some of the things that he himself talked about.
Let him finish. Yes.
Those are some of the things that he talked about. The support, even the people that they were going to train. This is Chebukati. He's talking about IEBC, not he himself.
Don't you think the support that he really needed was non-interference by political parties like Jubilee, which has 4 commissioners whose allegiances are openly partisan?
Come on. There you go again, Linus. That's coffee shop talk. We cannot say they form their allegiance there. Then what are we going to say about the rest? Then it's a partisan commission.
It is.
If we call it that. And then nobody has the right then to point fingers at them. That's all I'm saying.
Now, from what you're saying, and this we are going to say in conclusion, all of us, we actually have to close this. I don't believe many people are watching us right now. Many people should be just a moment, because I want to pick from his point, which is he agrees there is interference, and he says they are partisan. He says they are not independent. Don't you panelists think that then it's time to amend the name and remove independent from the IEBC? Miguna?
No. First of all, to correct him, the panel that picked the IEBC was chaired by the chairperson of the Public Service Commission. It was not Orengo and Kiraitu, so that's not right. And then
the bypass. How he came into being.
Can I just say this?
Okay, go on.
The panel was the normal, government panel that picks independent commissions that was chaired by the chair of the Public Service Commission.
Bernadette
and then the names were taken, and it is the president that picked the least qualified. So that's a fact. Now, no, we don't change the name. We don't change the name to anything else except the Independent Boundaries and Electoral Commission. The only thing we change, and this is what I've been speaking about for years now, and we must start doing it, we must appoint people who are qualified and have integrity to public office. We must do that. Then we must elect people who have capacity and have integrity to public office. When you do that, they will deliver pursuant to the constitutional and legal remit. You will not go wrong. But what we have done over the years is to go for people who are politically connected, people with the right last surname, people who have paid some bribe, or people who are related to people. That is not the way to lead a country. That is not how to get democracy work. And that is why we are where we are. So Chebukati is not responsible for his lack of intelligence. He's not responsible for being weak, but he's responsible for allowing himself to be compromised. He's responsible for staying in an office that he's not qualified for. If I was him, I would not have taken up the job if I knew that 9 people defeated me in the interview and were more qualified than me. And then after the mess, and knowing that Chiloba and others were micromanaging the commission on behalf of external forces, I would have thrown in the towel. But obviously, the man was looking for a job. We had never heard of Chebukati before he was appointed. We had never heard that Chebukati was a good lawyer. He was not a good speaker. He was not a good writer. So what was he? He was nothing in this republic. We extracted nothing and made him chairman of the Electoral Commission.
Right. Linus, can I just ask a question? Actually, it's somebody who has tweeted what Miguna has said. And I mean, it's just throwing a spanner in the works. Miguna said, what if, just one question, and actually I'm forwarding it to you. Yeah. And somebody has tweeted, this is not me. Then again, it's a spanner in the works. Yes. And he's asking, what if the best candidate was Kikuyu?
You see, unlike you, Mutuma, unlike you, I have not mentioned the word Kikuyu or Luo or whatever.
I agree. I don't care.
No.
It's somebody who has asked a spanner in the works.
We are
because
5.
Said we go for the best.
Mutuma, can I speak?
What if?
Can I speak, Mutuma? Mutuma, can I speak?
Yes, speak, sir.
I don't bloody care.
Right.
I spoke of integrity and qualification, period. So why are you dragging in the word Kikuyu?
Actually, I want to close that. I want to close that particular argument. Hold on, Muthuma, because indeed the ethnicity of the top 3 is very well known.
That is exactly
it's very well known, and I want to. I don't want us to go there. I want to bring in Charles.
You see?
Yeah, Charles. We were discussing about IEBC and the incapacity of the body. The last 2 times, the Chebukati Commission and the Isaac Hassan Commission, to live up to the word independent?
First of all, Linus, personally I'm concerned at how public figures in our country become punching bags. We project to them all our faults, all our failures, all our weaknesses. We expect them to be perfect when we are not. We bash them for things which they are liable for partly, and where we are also liable for partly. We tend to seldom engage in self-reflection and check how much have we contributed to the situation that we find ourselves in. It would be difficult for prominent, very capable Kenyans to aspire to be the chair of IEBC if when they become the chair of IEBC they get skewered by the political coalitions, by panelists on air. They get called all kinds of names. They have families. They are trying to do the best they can, several of them. Of course, they sometimes make mistakes, sometimes deliberate mistakes, sometimes it is mistakes that are inadvertent. I think when we come to IBC, what I would say is this, that there is no institution in Kenya that faces the kind of political pressures every 5 years that IBC faces, because it's as if Kenyans, when it comes to matters of politics, it's a matter of life and death. It's more important than anything else in this country. Even the Supreme Court only has to deal with an election petition for 2 weeks, and that's the end of their job. But the Election Commission has to deal with constant political barrage, disagreement, and attacks for a substantially longer period of time. So I don't want to excuse IBC when they have made mistakes, but I want to say that mistakes have been made by several institutions. IBC needs to be independent, but independence against what or from what? Does it mean independence from Kenyans who are members of political parties? Does it mean independence from the executive? And yet they need to deal with the executive in matters of provision of security and so on. Does it mean independence from the judiciary? So I think we have reached a situation where constitutional scholars talk about the concept of checks and balances. Independence doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean that you don't consider what other organs are doing and institutions and what role they will play in your success. For example, NASA and Jubilee have a very big impact on the success or failure of IEBC because they are the major political coalitions. And if they disagree as viciously as they've been doing recently, there's no IEBC in the world that can resolve the situation. So I would like to say that the concept of checks and balances probably would have required IEBC to be more consultative, to have greater public participation. I think they made substantial efforts after Chebukati came in to overcome the weaknesses of the Isaac Hassan-led commission in terms of dealing with the political coalitions. But you can see where it has led him. It has led him to a situation where he's not trusted by either political coalition.
Yeah, this was supposed to be our last topic, but due to a lot of demands from viewers, we didn't know that all of you are watching, and we do indeed appreciate. We're actually going to have one last subject, but before I introduce that subject, I would want to close on the issue of independence of the IEBC by giving a chance to Shifa, Muthuma, and Shimeka to make their very quick contributions before I introduce our last segment for the night. Shifa.
I think it is shocking that Kanjama, being a lawyer or advocate, talks about he does not know what IEBC needs to be independent in regards to what. That is baffling. Because when you talk of independence of an institution, my layman terminologies and understanding lead me to understand that I need them to be independent from 1, coercion, 2, infiltration, 3, lack of integrity, all these things we keep talking about. I mean, seriously? Do your damn job. Somebody just tweeted and said, if Chebukati did his job, we would not worry about him being bashed. And by the way, when we talk about bashing somebody, we are not attacking his character. So his family, his relatives and friends are okay. We are attacking the job he has done, and he has done it tremendously at a failing scale. Right? Because he understands, and he should have understood, the people who elected him or selected him. I repeat that. Because he wasn't qualified to sit where he does. And that's a problem for me, that we get people who are not qualified, and then you talk about we are bashing him. And that makes other people who want to sit in these kinds of positions wonder why they should or shouldn't. Then why are they doing that? If you're intimidated by the role, if you're intimidated by what is expected of you, why do you want it? Because I don't understand that. Nobody's bashing Chebukati for failing to be a human being. All of us are flawed. We are bashing him for failing to understand that he leads an institution that runs a fundamental process in this country, a country that has never had a ballot justice. Do we get that? Because that's the only reason why we are here. Because people do not have justice at the ballot. People's voices did not matter on the 8th, and they will not matter today. People's voices have never mattered before in this country, and you want to behave like we don't understand these things. Kanjama, really, you're an advocate, my friend. Elevate this conversation. Hold people to higher power. Hold people to higher moral authority, to higher ground. Article 6 talks about leadership and integrity. And then we want people to waltz around such kind of issues that have now cost 67 plus lives in Kisumu. This is a joke.
Charles, you've upset Shifa.
I've been challenged.
Been
First
bashed.
of all, I'll be methodical in my response. Shifa,
Methodical and brief.
yes,
Yeah.
methodical and brief. Shifa, first of all, says Chebukati is not qualified. Wrong. He's qualified. In fact, he meets the constitutional threshold. If anything, probably in this panel you'll not find somebody who meets that constitutional threshold, but he does. Number 2, 15 years post-admission. You don't have it in Kenya. You have it 23 in Canada, not in Kenya. Not in Kenya. Number two, and I need to be brief. Number 2, Chebukati was one of the, I think there were 2 shortlisted candidates by the selection panel whose names were forwarded to the president to select, which means the president was given 2 out of those 10 who are interviewed to select 1. That means the selection panel, after considering all the constitutional criteria, including regional balance and whatever, thought these were the 2 best because they were submitted as the 2 names from the 10. So that Chebukati was then, his name was forwarded to Parliament. He was further
I
vetted.
think the issue, if I got Schiffer right,
So,
Charles,
yes.
is not really how Chebukati was appointed. That's not
No,
the
they
major
have
issue.
said that he's
The,
not
the
qualified.
major issue she has with your argument
Yes.
is the independence of the IBC.
I was coming to that as point
Please go
number
straight.
3. But
Go-
I had
go
to
st-
finish point number 2 because people are bashing Chebukati here that he's not qualified. He's qualified, he's competent, he's a lawyer. I'm the chair of LSK Nairobi branch, and I can speak on behalf of lawyers who apply to these positions who've met the constitutional threshold. Don't bash them unless you know what are those qualifications. What are those standards? Number 3, on the question of independence, I think Shifa is being simplistic. Allow me to say that. Independence is a multi-textured reality. It is an issue that is complex. We are not just talking about independence in the general sense. Even when we talk about the judiciary, we talk about independence from bias, prejudice, and so on. We are talking about independence the way all constitutional commissions are required to be independent and at the same time accountable to the people of Kenya. They are meant to engage in public participation. So independence doesn't mean isolation. It is so easy to bash Chebukati and IBC, but let me ask a simple question. If the Supreme Court, no, it's a rhetorical question.
Okay.
It doesn't require an answer. It's a rhetorical question. If the Supreme Court had upheld the elections of 8th of August, it's hypothetical, it's rhetorical. Would 67 people have died? No. So to blame Chebukati for the death of 67 people, I think is a bit too emotional. I think it's too polemic, and I think it is wrong. The reality of the matter is that Chebukati and his commission are unfortunate to be the first IBC to have a presidential election result overturned. The question of whether that presidential election result was
But
rightly...
didn't he walk straight into it based entirely on how he performed?
Okay, let me say this, Linus. I hope in a future panel, because we don't have time today, you'll allow some of us lawyers to really articulate and break down the decision of the Supreme Court of 20th of September. Not the one of 1st of September. The reasoning of 20th of September. We all operate on the assumption that the Supreme Court was 100% right and IBC was 100% wrong. And I think it is time we begin critiquing also.
No, that's okay.
And that we will do at a later moment.
But surely,
what we know now
yes,
is that IBC, after the election was overturned, had 60 days, something that has not been had by any other organization, any other previous electoral commission, to organize fresh presidential election in a toxic environment. They did what they could while the political players were at each other's throats. Then you want to throw that blame on Chebukati because Raila and Uhuru cannot agree, because one party has decided to boycott, because the Supreme Court was not clear on what IBC needed to do in regard to whether they needed to get rid of some people, whether they needed to get rid of Al Ghurair. You want to throw all that on Chebukati, and you see these guys who are holier than thou and feel that Chebukati should bear the entire blame of the nation, do not realize the challenges they are facing are partly because of their own statements and of their own inability to come together and be neutral and objective in realizing.
I'm being very unfair to my left again. But
I want to say that one of the biggest problems we are having in our country.
I need you to listen to me.
Okay.
Because you haven't addressed yourself to the issue raised by Schiffer.
Specifically, what is it?
Specifically, the question of independence.
Oh, I had already spoken about independence.
Linus, can I just take 1 minute?
Okay.
This is what independence means, even to lawyers. Administrative independence, meaning you have space to operate as an institution administratively. Financial independence, you have your own budget that is not pegged on any external influence. And then operational independence. You have the ability to function, to execute your duties without taking instructions from outside. You are immune from external influence. You are only guided by the law and the constitution and ethics. That is what independence means. Now, all these things Mr. Kanjama has said has nothing to do with why the court nullified the election. The court nullified the election because it was bungled, because it was rigged, because it was not performed in accordance with the constitution and the law. Now, did Jubilee manage the election? No. Did NASA manage the election? No. Did any of the candidates tell Chebukati, don't abide by the law and the constitution? No. So the failure is squarely with Chebukati. He is the chair of the IEBC. We can't shift that. He took that position. Nobody forced him to take that position. He applied for that position. You apply for a position when you are qualified. He was interviewed. He was number 10. We don't care whether only his name and somebody else was taken to the president and the president chose number 10.
At the risk, of repeating the question,
yes.
Miguna,
Yes.
don't you think there is a fair share of blame that should go to Chiloba as well?
Yes, correct. That's a good question. I was not saying that all the blame goes to Chebukati. In fact, maybe if you were to apportion blame, maybe 80% of the blame goes to Chiloba. But now I'm talking of the overall manager. It's like saying, if the economy of Kenya collapses, or if insecurity increases in Kenya, who do we blame? We blame the president, even though he's not the minister for all these other things. We must blame the overall in charge. And the overall in charge is Chebukati. Then, of course, there is Cheloba, there is Muhati, there is Kisait, there are all the other minions. But who is their boss? Chebukati.
Let me just make one statement before we go to Simeka.
Charles, let's allow them. Let's allow them. 1 minute each, please, Simeka.
Yes, I just wanted to, well, with regards to independence, I think Miguna has laid it out very well, in addition to what Shefa said. But I just want to say this with regards to anyone who wishes, who aspires to take up public office, especially high office. You must understand that you are going into that office to solve our problems, to solve problems in society, not to start saying, I am like you, and comparing yourself to the people whose problems you want to solve. That is the meaning of public office. Otherwise, don't do that. Shut up somewhere and make some money in business or whatever else, in farming or whatever else. But you want public office, it's about solving problems of society. Secondly, Kanjama, and this is to something you said, I know so many lawyers, and I work with so many lawyers who have more than 15 years post-admission experience. They qualify for so many things, but they are not suitable for many, many things. They are not competent. They are not intelligent. They can hardly tell the meaning of the word intelligence, in fact. And they are not capable, but they have the basic qualification. They have been in practice for even 20 years. Some of them cannot even draw planes, but they have been in practice for more than 20 years. So that thing of going to qualification and stopping there is wrong. We shouldn't do that. Finally, didn't this man understand his role? He ought to have understood his role. So I refuse to excuse him, because then if you don't understand, don't go for it. Please, do not go for it. I wish to stop there because of time.
Thank you.
No, I'll still go back to what I said. It doesn't matter how emotional, we become. And it's not, a matter of repeating or not. Kanjama has actually alluded to the fact that this job comes actually with quite a serious and a heavy task. And if it lacks the basic support from the stakeholders, the interference that we have seen, all right, has been all over. And people do know that there has been serious interference with the commission. And so if we are talking about the independence of that commission, Let us allow it and give them the support that they require. It is as simple as that. It does not matter how many times we keep talking about Chebukati. It does not matter how many times we bash him. The fact remains he was given that job. And all we needed to do, and all the stakeholders needed to do, Linus, is to give him support. It does not matter who comes and sits in that seat. As long as he's not supported by the stakeholders, it won't work. I guarantee you that.
Right, and we go now to the final subject of the night. We've actually had this discussion across 2 days now because we started, it is in the morning now, the 27th of October. We had the election yesterday, the 26th of October, and it is the subject of our final segment, which is about the legitimacy of the exercise that was held yesterday. And what I want us to do is to quickly put across our thoughts on what happens next. What's the exercise, and is the result going to be a legitimacy problem? And I want to start with my left with Gabriel.
And first of all, I've heard people talking about turnouts. Number one, let me be the first one to say this. I don't think the turnout really will delegitimize the process. That's one thing. The number two, it depends on two things. When you call it a process that was not legitimate, what are you pegging it on? Just the fact that people didn't come out to vote? And those that came, did they do a legitimate job? And I think they did. It was a legitimate exercise from where I'm seated. And the numbers that will come out, given the very fact that we are trying to meander across this, trying to define the moment that these people never came out, this area never came out, this one's never came out. It's not as it was in August 8th, and it should not be, because statistics have proven all over the world that this is just a scientific fact, that you can never get the numbers that we got earlier on. And I put it again to you, across to you, Linus, even if we are to go for another runoff, for another election, we will still even get lower numbers. So if we are trying to compare apples to apples, we will never get. And I've told you the supporting factors of these MCAs and governors and what have you, they were lacking. So the numbers that we are going to get, and from where I'm seated, if they would come to the realm of 40%, I'll be very surprised. In fact, those were the numbers that I was working with. And it came to about, and Miguna was right, it came to about 32%. You know, Chebukati came and gave us the 48, and from the Kim's kit, it was about 6 million and something. Actually adds up to about 32%. I don't know whether it has gone up or not. But if it does go up, and the realms of 40% is arrived at, trust you me, then I think that will be a very high number. But legitimately, I think it's a legitimate process.
Legitimate? Simeka?
No. And let me begin with the broader context. Kenya has a population of, give and take, about 47 million, out of which we say we have 19.2 or thereabout registered voters, but then the actual number of legible registered voters is 28 million. Therefore, already through the registration processes and other things, we have disenfranchised 8 million Kenyans, voters, not just Kenyans who are voters. Now, the turnout, when ultimately you look at this larger context, the turnout is probably going to be about 15% of eligible voters. This so-called election, why I insist is not legitimate, to me is like as I think it's Miguna, one of us said earlier, was like a referendum. In the absence of any credible competition, because of the failures of IEBC, because of the interference of those who have who have their hands on the levers of state power, particularly those who are in charge of security sector, instruments of violence and so on of state, which therefore made it impossible for there to be any meaningful reform within the IEBC before we can go to fair competition, fair and just competition. This to me is a referendum on the president, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, and their so-called tyranny of numbers. This is really the time for them to prove to us actually they do have that tyranny of numbers. And secondly, just a reconfirmation of the incompetence and incapability of the Electoral Commission that we have currently to carry out any credible election. So for me, not legitimate.
Not legitimate.
A referendum on those two that I've talked about.
Thank you, Simeka. Shefa.
I think credibility comes from an election meeting a certain threshold. So did this election, first of all, meet a certain threshold? Was the participation of everybody in this election leading towards it being legitimate? You know, those are questions that you ask so that you can answer what legitimacy would come and be, right? Because I think when you don't have the element of competition, like you said, then you're competing against yourself, by yourself, according to yourselves, in your own self-created. I mean, I don't know what legitimacy means at this point, because it is so open and it is so obvious, and it's like an open secret. We all know it. We cannot talk of a legitimate election or a credible poll that even the chairman had said himself, I cannot guarantee that, but still, you know, the election is on. So even me trying to analyze it and go through my brain trying to figure it out beats me specifically, because what am I analyzing? The person who's running the show had already said, by the way, I don't know where we are going. I don't know what results I'm going to deliver. I can't. But also, you know, I can't resign, right? So I'm here to stay. So what does that mean? Because that is it. Like, it's a simple thing. You have already said, if you stated now that I am not able to control this panel, so we can't have a conversation that is answering questions, that is articulate, that is intellectual, that is, you know, enriching to the viewers, then you have already failed us, because you brought us here, then it's all chaotic. So then someone asks, what do you think about the panel that Linus kind of had? You know, I think at some point we need to start understanding certain things. You cannot have good if you don't have good people in play, right? And that's a simple matter, because the difference between states that are progressing democratically is the people. It is always the people. It is the people in high office. It is the people who participate in processes in those countries. It is the people who give legitimacy to these processes. So did Kenyans today give legitimacy to a process that they didn't participate in? How is that even? You know, it's not even a discourse. For me, it's not. I lack words. Miguna, take it over.
Yes, Linus, thank you very much. Number one, the process was illegitimate, okay? Through and through, illegitimate. And the exercise has not given legitimacy to President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. Why do I say that? If there is any proof that we needed that Raila Odinga defeated Uhuru Kenyatta on August 8th, this is it. Now Kenyans have proven it beyond any reasonable doubt, as we say in law. Why do I say that? So let's take it that this was a referendum, as I have said before, and the referendum was this. Do you want to vote for President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto as president and deputy, respectively? If you do, come out and vote. Raila says, do not come out and vote. So those who refuse to go and vote are definitely standing with Raila. And what are the figures? CNN says, and I would tend to believe CNN than I would believe Chebukati, that 27% turnout is what we experience. So only 27%. So then where are the rest of the voters? The rest of the voters voted with their feet. They stayed home. Who told them to do that? Raila Odinga told them to do that yesterday. So then who, by analogy, did they vote for? They essentially voted for Raila Odinga. So this is a referendum Raila Odinga has won against President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. That's number one. So why do we call this a sham election that lacks legitimacy? What is legitimacy? Legitimacy is ratification. Legitimacy is support. Legitimacy is endorsement. Legitimacy means we agree with you. What has the country told President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, who insisted that elections must happen on President Uhuru Kenyatta's birthday? They have said, we did not want it. By the way, the Supreme Court did not order that elections must happen on October 26th. If you recall, the first decision of the IBC was that elections should have happened on the 17th. They moved the date themselves to the 26th. They have now decided arbitrarily again that they would move the date to Saturday. Did the Supreme Court order them to do that? No. So this argument that they could not have an election on any other date was just false from the beginning. So what am I saying in the end? The Constitution requires that elections must meet the very basic requirements of the Constitution and the law. Did these elections meet it? No. Did these elections meet the international best practices? No. Did these elections give the popular will of the people? Did it reflect the popular will of the people? No, because 27% cannot reflect the popular will of the people. So, can Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto govern Kenya even if they got the majority of 27%? Absolutely not. So where do we go from here? This is what I am going to say. On November 1st, President Uhuru Kenyatta's temporary incumbency ends. He can extend it, in which case he cannot run again by operation of law, because he would be serving his second term. He must make a decision. He's going to put the country first, and the Constitution first, and democracy first, and cede power, and let us go through a credible election through a caretaker government, or we will just do what we have to do and vote and make sure that he's not president. Now, we will use all the available means that the law allows us to do.
Charles, legitimacy.
I think before Linus, I deal with the question of legitimacy. The last time I was on air with Miguna, some of the listeners were concerned about what Miguna has repeated here, that after 1st of November, Uhuru presidency will have come to an end, or you'll have to have a caretaker government. And I'll just say that the Constitution says that the president's term ends when a new president is sworn in. But coming to the question of legitimacy, there is no question that the electoral exercise that took place on 26th of October, which is yesterday, because you're already on 27th of October, lacked certain features that would be necessary to secure a broad legitimacy. And legitimacy here means acceptability, a kind of like broad consensus of a big swath of the Kenyan population. But having said that, it's very easy for us to project onto IBC the failures of various institutional players. And I feel that is what unfortunately we've been doing. What happens if the political coalitions go hammer and tongs at each other as they have done the last 2 months? Can IBC be able to carry out a credible election when the political players are not cooperating? So I think we need to cast the net of blame a bit wider. The environment to have elections that are credible, and I'm not talking about free and fair, I'm talking about legitimacy, is one that is created by several players. Some of them have come to the football field and have refused to follow the directions of the referee. They are now blaming the referee that the match has ended up with the spectators accusing the referee of shambles. The players are also guilty of the shambles behind this particular exercise. So I think the political players bear a big chunk of the blame. And for me, I think the other critical point is this, as we conclude on this question of legitimacy: will IBC ever be able to have an election which meets that credibility test, which secures a high voter turnout, if any coalition at the 11th hour can choose to boycott or walk out, if the other coalition can choose to impose the date of the elections? Because I think both Jubilee and NASA in their various stances are guilty of what has happened. So it's easy for us to project all our frustrations to Chebukati, to say Chebukati is incompetent, Chebukati has not done a good job. But honestly, what could Chebukati do if the followers of Raila say, once Baba says we must obey? If the followers of Uhuru say, of Jubilee say, once Uhuru's government has indicated we must obey? Nobody's ready to listen to Chebukati. Is Chebukati meant to be a Superman? Some people think that Chebukati is meant to be made of a different
Charles,
cloth.
I don't want you to go back to Chebukati. We've dealt with Chebukati, and I don't really believe it's legitimate of this panel to keep viewers awake beyond 1 a.m. the second day of the panel discussion, which is why I want us to conclude with a very simple question. I think as a panel we can all project very accurately that Uhuru Kenyatta will win this election, and IBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati will pronounce that here. And I want to hear for 30 seconds each, what do you expect after that announcement by Chebukati? And I want to start with the...
Well, I can see somebody going to the Supreme Court, obviously. And this time around, I foresee something different. Because I'm talking about the legitimacy of an exercise and the credibility of that process. Some people may look at it differently. We talked about the boycotts, which are within the parenthesis of everybody's democratic right, but the intrusion that we saw in various counties, in the Nyanza zones, actually didn't help the matter. And I foresee something very different. But moving on to just, distance a little bit, create like a small distance from what Miguna said, caretaker governments, and whoever comes in, the president will be there. The president sitting on that seat after this particular date will be illegitimate. I think that is wrong because our constitution doesn't allow that. And to quote somebody that I like a lot, and I like reading from this person, he said one thing, that Raila does not have the ionis of leading or having a democratic governance in this country. And that man is right there.
You had 30 seconds.
Will Uhuru Kenyatta win this election or not? I mean, who will win? I think you're saying that,
No, the question is he'll win the election. I think it's agreed right across this panel. But what do you expect after that?
After that?
Yeah.
No, actually, why I revisited the question is because not that he will win. He already won. Only that his winning was delegitimized by NASA pulling the rug from under his feet. He already won like 3 weeks after the Supreme Court decision. Already that decision had been made. What next? Resistance. I mean, this political quagmire we are in, the challenges we face, the political challenges we face as a nation, they're not going to go away easily. You must not underestimate the resolve of the people who are unhappy with the situation in this country, the situation of injustice, the situation of political exclusion and so on. There are people who are going to tell you, and I'm one of them, as for me, give me liberty or give me death.
The resistance won't work, man.
Okay, let's go to Sheffield.
Yes.
Yeah. 30 seconds.
After declaration of Uhuru winning this election, what will happen? What do I foresee? Heavy speculation, but one thing that I foresee is the affirmation of the resistance that Gabriel thinks will not work, and I need to define what that means right now so he understands it. The context in which Raila Amolo Odinga talked about a resistance movement in the country right now is very ripe for it. And I will tell you why. Because for the longest time, this country has belonged to the rich, excluding the poor. And the poor are the majority. The rich are the minority. And there is a lot of discussion around economy and how the economy is struggling and how KEPSA statistics are talking about the country has lost a couple billions here and there.
700
but
to be exact.
yes, but nobody's equating this to the amount of money we have lost through corrupt human beings in office, right? Nobody's equating this to the fact that we have lacked proper leadership and very many companies have shut down and moved to other countries. So when we talk about an overall blanket economic suffrage that we have experienced as a country, it is a lie to just blanket it on political situations. Also, it would be very, very insincere of us to not understand that we cannot have economic prosperity in a political situation that is not progressive and inclusive of everybody else. So what will happen after Uhuru wins? What will happen is identity politics, which is something global right now, if you know it, is what will happen. People are seeking somebody, and sadly for so many people, it will be the face of Raila Odinga, right? People are seeking somebody they can identify with. And I love that you laugh, but you don't understand. No, let me finish. Let me finish.
Gabriel,
The only person, let me tell you
Gabriel,
clearly and
keep your
frankly, the only person who has done more for democratic processes for this country is that same person. I speak, but I do not even belong to NASA. Because I recognize Gabriel. I recognize his efforts. I recognize his efforts towards achieving what he has achieved. He is the only person who stood and said this election that was termed void by the Supreme Court was rigged, after people thought he's a perennial loser. Without him standing in that particular space, we would not be here talking about the Supreme Court is even supreme, that laws are even upheld. So let me tell you, you can think it a joke, but do not take it as such. Kenyans who feel disenfranchised in this republic are many, and they identify with that term, resistance. Watch.
Thank you. Gabriel, that's no, Gabriel. Sorry, Miguna, please proceed.
Thank you, Linus. Linus, I, with due respect, disagree with your statement that Uhuru Kenyatta will win these elections. These are not elections. These are not elections. Whatever is going to win are not elections. Uhuru Kenyatta is involved in a coronation ritual to become a despot. He is intending to govern Kenya using the gun. Because if you see the whole of Nyanza, most of Eastern Coast, most of Nairobi, a lot of parts of the Rift Valley here and there, he has unleashed raw force. So what do we do confronted by a dictator who has failed to win legitimacy from the people of Kenya? This is what you do. Jefferson, the former president of the United States, one of the people architects of the Constitution of the United States, says, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes a duty. The people of this country have a positive duty, not just to resist, but to do as Lincoln said, Abraham Lincoln, those who pervert democracy and constitution must be overthrown by the people. I am not saying the overthrow has to be violent. I am not saying that you have to do it through military force, but I'm saying sovereignty vests with the people. The power belongs to the people. And that those who believe that armed forces can be used to suppress the people, to dominate them, to make sure that we roll back the gains so that you can rule us by force, I am going to say this: you will not succeed. We will make sure that you don't succeed. Democracy will thrive. The Constitution must be defended. And some of us are prepared to do it to the end.
Thank you very much. Charles?
Linus, I'll try to be brief as possible. You asked a very specific
I actually require
question.
you to be very brief.
You asked a specific question. What is likely to happen after the likely declaration of Uhuru Kenyatta as the winner of the fresh presidential elections that took place on 26th of October? My expectation is, number one, there'll be a legal process of challenging that declaration that will take place in the Supreme Court. The outcome is not guaranteed one way or the other. The NASA side is very confident of success, in the same way that Jubilee was confident of success after the 8th August elections. The Supreme Court will decide that one. Second, there's going to be a political process that has to take place. I think it's clear to the country that regardless of the outcome of the legal process, our country is too divided to proceed without some effort made at rapprochement, both at the level of the principles of the two coalitions and some kind of nation building, harmony, and so on at the level of the supporters of these two coalitions. That is a process that many Kenyans in leadership positions want to lead, including the church leaders, the business community, and so on. Their efforts at mediation, they must continue. There must be a political solution that does not have a result where significant segments of the population feel alienated from the governance of the country, where they feel that this is not their country. Beyond the legal and the political, I think there's going to be need for maybe a relook at the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Clearly, the exercise of the last few months have shown that there are certain aspects of the Constitution that are not fit for purpose. There are certain institutions that seem to be incapable of dealing with certain critical political crises, and there may be need to have revisiting, but not in the negative, but in the constructive sense of rebuilding institutions and processes that have broken down during this process. That's what I think is a way forward for our country.
Thank you, Charles, and I wish we had time to discuss that, including manners of the Kenyan people rather than just the institutions. And indeed, on that point, Charles Kanjama, Miguna, Shefo Kore, Joseph Shimeka, and finally Gabriel Muthuma, I thank you very, very much for being members of this very eminent panel tonight that discussed and tried to make sense of the events of yesterday, actually, when the election was held. We are here at the National Tallying Center at the Bomas of Kenya. This has been coming live to you right from here, where the IEBC, including its chairman, Wafula Chebukati, are still going through the numbers before they start releasing the results. And indeed, we are informed that those results, some of them are in the public portal, and you can be able to access it. Thank you very much to the viewers who stayed with us this late. Please go to bed now. Thank you very much, and have a good night.